Welcome to the Deep Dive,
Emerald City Hockey's Seattle Kraken podcast.
Hey, everybody, welcome back to the Deep Dive, Emerald City Hockey's Seattle Kraken podcast. RJ, it's Mailbag week. Got all of our questions. You did a great job, as always, compiling everything, sorting it into kind of different sections and subjects. And I can't wait to dive in this week.
Yeah, sorry I didn't color code it this time, Dylan. I hope that wasn't too much trouble for you, but
Never
I love
formats into Gmail well anyway.
that's true. From my Excel spreadsheet into Gmail, I think it cut off like the second half of questions. So the second half is going to be a surprise to you, but that's going to be even better. But I love these mailbag episodes. Always love hearing you guys' questions.
Yeah, definitely. And especially as we go into off seasons, I feel like there's always good questions because it's when we get the broadest, purview of questions from everybody. So definitely looking forward to everything that we have going today. And while it's mailbag episode for you and I, RJ, as we transition over to thank our wonderful sponsor, the law offices of Rico Tessendor, I can't help but think, and we know this from Rico himself as well, how many people in the community have reached out with questions of their own to Rico. And it is one of those things when you have a legal question, right? Unless you're a lawyer, unless you've gone to law school or you have somebody in your family who has, it's a very complicated thing, right? When you have to get involved in something legal, and it could be even more complicated when there's been an injury, a personal injury of any kind. And thankfully, there are people like Rico that you can reach out to when you have those questions and ask them.
Exactly. When you're in a situation like that and you've been hurt, that's the person to go to, not us. He is qualified to answer those mailbag questions of a sort. Do not send those for our mailbag. Forward those on to Rico.
Exactly. You can get that free consultation and really talk everything out with somebody who's going to absolutely take care of you and knows what he's doing. And while we hope none of you ever need his services, the odds say that at some point someone out there will be involved in an accident, whether on the road, at work, or anywhere in between. And when you are, we hope you call Rico at 425-778-9800 or visit his website, ricotessendor.com, to schedule a free consultation. He's won millions of dollars for his clients and helped thousands of people in the greater Seattle area. And as a fellow member of the ECH community, we know he'll help you too. Now, RJ, into the mailbag.
Yes, let's dive right in. And we'll start with some questions about the draft, prospects, younger players. Figured that'd be a good place to start. And of course, with the Kraken having their draft lottery result, we know they have the 7th overall pick. Now, we got a lot of questions around that. And we'll start with this one from Juan. Who would you want the Kraken to draft at number 7? And I'll let you start on a lot of these, Dylan. You're a prospects guy. Who are you thinking at 7?
I guess the best player, assuming Gavin McKenna, Ivar Stenberg, Caleb Malhotra, right? The 3 forwards that have the highest upside are all gone, which I can't imagine them surviving past 4, the 3 of them. You get looking at a lot of defensemen, and I don't say this just because the Kraken haven't ever really drafted a defenseman high, and so that's kind of one of the things when you look at their prospect pool, they could definitely target and identify, because they do have guys like Blake Fiddler, Ty Nelson, Tyson Jugnaut. Like, they do have good deep prospects in there, and I am in favor of best available. But I think this year in the draft, specifically at 7, best available is probably going to mean a defenseman. And the defenseman that I'm the highest on, that I would love to see the Kraken draft, is Carson Karros. And I just think he is a fantastic offensive defenseman. I love the way that he plays. He has unbelievable patience. Every time I've talked about him, it's like the 3rd or 4th time on something I've talked about him to everybody, most of it on Patreon. It is the patience that he plays with, particularly in the offensive zone, the way he can survey the offensive zone, wait for plays to develop. He has a very, very small panic zone, right? He's not going to move the puck just because he feels like he has to. He'll wait and let the defense really collapse in around him, make sure that he has a good, viable passing target available, and then he'll go ahead and do that. Or he'll wander around the zone, and if the defense doesn't ever bite and close in towards him, he'll just find a shooting lane and he'll take the shot. And most of the time he manages to score because he has a fantastic shot as well. So I'm a huge fan of his. He is the player that I would hope could fall to the Kraken at 7.
Yeah, looking at different mock drafts, it seems like that is a possibility. I've
Mhm.
seen him kind of in that area. So, unlike someone like maybe Chase Reed, who I would be very
Yeah.
surprised if he fell to 7. And my answer is basically just the best of the D. The best of the remaining defensemen there is who I think they should take. There aren't a ton of forwards that I look in that group. If there is one, I guess I'd want to swing for the fences and go for someone like Ethan Belchitz just because of that size and the potential there. But I think don't overthink this. Just take the best of the defensemen.
Yeah, I would say like if I was you know, an advisor to the Kraken, which we definitely aren't, as we'll get into later with a lot of the questions asked to us. Yeah, I would say if you really don't like any of the D, I would take a swing on him at forward. But I think my guess is your scouting staff's going to like one of those defenders better, probably.
And especially just with that hole in your prospect pool, like you could really use a high end defenseman there. It feels so simple that this year that's the direction they go.
Definitely.
So next question here from Savage: assuming Toronto takes Gavin McKenna first overall, what are the chances the Kraken could move up for Ivar Stenberg, and what would that likely cost them? And so we also got a question from Nick who asked about the potential of maybe Vince Dunn plus the 7th pick for pick number 2. Now, of course, the Kraken could really use someone like Ivar Stenberg. That would be fantastic. But as far as the odds of it happening, I'd say very, very low, like under 5%. And the reason is these trades just don't usually happen. No team has traded a top 5 pick post draft lottery since 2008. That is a long time ago. We're talking 18 years ago. The Sharks shouldn't do it. If I'm thinking about it in their position, they should
Yeah.
just take Ivar Stenberg and stay at number 2. There's no reason they should move that pick. And I guess if they did, because I want to answer this question here, like what would it cost them? It would probably be around something like Vince Dunn in number 7. I think the Kraken would still have to add more to that to get the Sharks to really think about it. But the Sharks would be looking for an impact defenseman who could help them right away and get better in the near term. I just don't know that the Kraken would. I don't think that there's a deal there.
I don't think there's a deal there either, because I think it would have to be a truly elite defenseman for the Sharks to kind of accelerate their timeline there,
Like
right?
maybe
Because that's
top
the
10 in
big
the NHL, you're thinking, yeah.
exactly, because that's the big thing with this. And you know, credit to Greer, general manager of the San Jose Sharks. He's done a really good job of not trying to rush the rebuilding process that they've had. And I don't see him changing that this year just because they won the lottery and move up to 2. If anything, that's just, again, the ability to add a Stenberg, or if they like a Chase Reed or one of the D, they can just draft them instead. That just makes so much sense for them. So you'd have to truly go above and beyond with what your offer was, and I just don't think the Kraken have the pieces to kind of pull something like that together. And as you said, right, if a child was born the day the last time a top 5 pick was traded, they would be draft eligible in this draft. Like they would be drafted now. That is kind of, you know, it just speaks to how this is just so unbelievably unlikely.
Yeah, and I say it every year with there's always so much talk around these top picks being moved or teams trading up, trading down. It just doesn't happen. Just doesn't
Yeah.
happen. And so I'll believe it when I see it. Next question here from Phil. What is the status of prospects like Edward Chalet and Jagger Firkus? Haven't heard much of anything regarding them. Are they still developing? Are they prospects that are a lower tier now?
Yeah, I mean, just watch the Firebirds game, and you'll definitely see them follow that team. We'll start with Jagger Firkus. I mean, Jagger Firkus has done a fantastic job of transitioning to the American Hockey League last year, and then building on what the foundation he kind of laid last year with this year. Nearly a point per game player at the American Hockey League level, just kind of continues to outperform any expectations that just about anybody has for him, given his size and his strength and his weight and all of that kind of stuff, because he is just a smart player. You saw it develop over the course of last year, his rookie season in the American Hockey League, him learning the areas of the ice he could go to, adjusting to the speed of the AHL versus the WHL, and him making those adjustments. And then, like I said earlier, building upon that this year, where he's just been a fantastic player in the top 6 for the Firebirds. Like I said, nearly point per game, has been scoring a ton of goals for them, has really learned and developed how to exist in a league playing against men at his size, right? At his height and weight, and how you don't have to be as scared of the net front in that scenario, right? You look at him in Moose Jaw, he used his shot, he played a little bit off of the crease, stuff like that. at the American Hockey League level. Obviously, his shot is fantastic and he can score from anywhere in the offensive zone, but he's also learned that with his size and with his smarts, he can pick and choose his time to kind of crash the crease, crash through the net, and get in there, find the gaps, find the openings, bang home rebounds, make plays like that. Understanding that you might take a big shot, but it's okay. Especially when you're almost that small, it's kind of easy because you just know you're going to go down. So as long as you fall okay, it's almost easier to take that hit from a big defenseman. But he's done a fantastic job of developing his pro style game. I think if the Kraken were in a little bit of a different position, and we'll talk about this more with some future questions, we would see him probably with the Kraken this next year. But I just think because of the way the Kraken are situated right now, it's probably not going to happen. But Jagger Firkus has developed into a fantastic AHL player that I think every AHL team would want on their roster. On the flip side, Edward Chalet, he is continuing to develop. I mean, this season in the AHL was better than last year in the AHL, but he hasn't necessarily developed to the place where it feels like we can say, okay, this is what he can be for the Kraken organization. It still feels like the jury's still out on him a lot. About a half a point per game player in the AHL this year, which, you know, as somebody who is more of a skill-based player, not necessarily somebody who projects to be a bottom six depth forward kind of, penalty killer and special teamer and all of that kind of stuff, doesn't speak great for his chances, if we're being honest. But he is still very young and he does still have such a high skill ceiling that if he is able to kind of figure out that adjustment to North America, which has really been his big struggle all along, is just adjusting to the North American game, you can see a path forward for him as like a top 9 scoring winger. It's just right now, it still feels like he's working through those growing pains.
Yeah, and historically, the clock is ticking on a player
Mhm.
like that. I mean, he's 21 years old. If he doesn't make a big jump next year, you're probably not looking at an NHL player, honestly.
Yeah.
Now, onto a prospect that I think is harder to see than rather just watching a Firebirds game. Why does it seem like no one is talking about Semyon Vyazovoy? With the numbers he has in the KHL, we should be pretty excited about that goalie prospect, no?
I mean, yes, he's fantastic goaltending numbers in the KHL. I will say traditionally KHL goaltenders do have much better numbers than really any other league in the world. So you always have to kind of, look at them as though they have a little bit of an asterisk there. But Vyazovoy's numbers are even, great for the KHL. So like he is just playing legit well. The reason nobody's talking about him is because there's never really been a ton of communication between him and his camp and the Seattle Kraken. There's been some loose communication, but it's always just kind of felt like he is comfortable in Russia and was just going to continue to play in Russia. It sounds like that might be starting to shift a little bit now because he is having that success in the KHL. And you have to think, for anybody, why wouldn't you want to see if you can get to the NHL and see if that success could carry over to the top league in the world? But until that happens, I don't think we're going to see a ton of talk about him in just larger prospect circles. And it's been a while. I mean, he was drafted many years ago at this point. So it's just, kind of you fall out of following those guys as much once you start getting D+5, which is what we'll be going into with him. But the big thing is also, if he was to make that jump over to North America and the Kraken were to do that, I believe he's still under contract in the KHL through next season. So you'd be talking about the following offseason that we could really start diving into whether or not he re-ups his contract in the KHL, if he then is open to coming over here. Could he compete, or would he only want to compete for a Kraken spot? Would he be open to the AHL? All of those kinds of questions, they all kind of have to be saved until next year. And by then he might have signed an extension even. So there's just not a lot that we can kind of talk about with him right now, just because of the lack of communication and the fact that he's under contract with a different team through next season.
Yeah, just a lot of questions around that situation. And also goaltending is just so hard to predict too. There are no sure bets when it comes to a goalie prospect anywhere, and much less so when it's someone having to come to North America. So it's just if he signs a contract with the Kraken, then we can just start talking about all of that.
Exactly.
Next question from Juan here. Which Firebirds player do you want, or players do you want to get a chance in the NHL next season, or do you expect to play a full season? So I think there's two different answers to that. The ones that we want to get a chance, and then the ones we expect to play a full season. So let's start with the want to get a chance.
Yeah, there's a lot of guys I want to get a chance and a serious look at the NHL level. I mean, we already talked about Jagger Firkus. I think he's absolutely earned it with his play, the American Hockey League level. He deserves an opportunity to play at the NHL level. I think Yanni Newman, as we've talked about all through kind of last season, deserves the chance to be playing at the National Hockey League level. So I'd start with those two guys kind of first and foremost. I would love to see if Tyson Jugmouth comes out of the gates next year with the Firebirds. I would love to see then, once there was maybe a D injury for the Kraken, a call up for Jugmouth, give him a little bit of opportunity to showcase what he could do. Same thing with Ty Nelson. I think Oscar Fisker-Molgaard will be with the Kraken next year, so we could save him for kind of the next section of the second part of this question. But those would be the guys that I think have really played well and deserve to kind of have an opportunity at that next level. A lot of the other guys are still just kind of developing down there. I know lots of people are probably wondering right now, why didn't I mention, say, a Logan Morrison? I think if the Kraken at all had any sort of need for a center up at the big club, I'd be like, yeah, let's give Logan Morrison an opportunity up there because of the growth that he's had at that position, kind of being the 1C for the Firebirds this year. It's just, even in my like land and thinking of wants and wanting to see him up there, I just cannot find a way possible for Logan Morrison to get inserted into the top 9 for the Kraken at center. So I'll kind of leave him out. But yeah, there's lots of guys that I would love to see in Kraken sweaters next year.
Yeah, I think you hit on just about all the ones that I had. Because I think like Nikkei Coco, probably best to just give him another season in the AHL. That's the only one that you didn't mention.
Yeah.
But yeah, you hit on everyone. I guess, wait, did you mention Jacob Melanson?
I didn't, because it kind of feels like he's already
It does, right?
Kraken,
So that
right?
I figured that was why the omission there.
Yeah.
But
yeah.
now, once players we expect to play a full season, because this is a much shorter list. You mentioned Oscar Fisker-Molgaard. Is there anybody else?
Jacob Melanson, right? Like I was kind of saving it for this one, but like those are really the only two guys. And this is, the unfortunate side of it, is just with the way the Kraken are set up, with the amount of contracts that they still have on the board, with the way that the front office and ownership have been communicating everything this year. And with Lane Lambert being the coach and kind of how we saw he handled guys like Yanni Newman last year, unless you are somebody who can come in and fit into that bottom 6 and play a very specific style of hockey, which Oscar Fisker-Molgaard and Jacob Melanson can, I just don't think that there's going to be a lot of opportunity for you. And that's where I feel like Jagger Firkus, Yanni Newman, a Logan Morrison, any of those guys that probably, normally would be kind of looking at making that jump to the National Hockey League level. I just don't think it's going to happen for them, because I don't think the Kraken either have space for them or the desire for a player like that, or a need for a player like that, the opportunity for a player like that. Because I think they're really just going to be looking for maybe a middle 6 winger, but really bottom 6 guys that are going to go out there and play like a Jacob Melanson, where they're going to grind things out, be a special teamer. Oscar Fisker-Molgaard, somebody who could play in a variety of situations. They just need those kinds of guys, or at least those are going to be the guys they're looking for, not necessarily a Jagger Firkus type.
Yeah, well said. I mean, given the organization's current mindset and the coach and everything, like there's not really an opportunity if you're a skill guy to kind of work your way up from the bottom 6 to the top 6 right now. That's one of the trade-offs you make when you're trying to make the playoffs. Next question from that Kraken fan page. What prospects are you comfortable moving for top-end talent? I love our prospect pool and selfishly don't want to let any of them go, but are there any in your list that are untouchable? Thanks, guys. Keep up the awesome work.
I mean, I guess it depends on what this top end talent is that you're trading for. It that does kind of,
for a star player,
things.
No prospect is untouchable.
I would agree with that. I don't think the Kraken have somebody that looks so good, so dominant, so for sure they're going to hit and become a top end player of their own, that I would say that they're untouchable. So I think it's just about finding, kind of the right fit around things, right? I wouldn't be trading a Jake O'Brien for just anybody, but I wouldn't say that Jake O'Brien, even coming off the dominant season that he has, the way he's looked with the Firebirds so far this postseason, I wouldn't say that he's untouchable, right? Like there's still gaps in his game that if you're talking about a trade for a, Jason Robertson type, I'd be like, yeah, he should be on the board. That's the price of doing business, and you'd make that trade, right? So yeah, I don't think anybody's untouchable.
Yeah. Which prospect would you least want them to trade? Like which one is the closest to untouchable?
It's probably Berkeley Catton.
If he counts, Berkeley Catton would be my answer.
If he counts, it's Berkeley Catton. If you don't count Berkeley Catton because he played basically all of last year, then it's Jake O'Brien. But like I said, I would be open to it depending on who it is that you're bringing in.
Yeah. No, are there any prospects that you would maybe look to move that you would actually try and include in some kind of deal if you are going out and trying to get NHL caliber talent? Which prospects would you be hoping to include in that deal?
If you're internally looking at the idea of bringing in top end talent at forward and you're not going to have openings anytime soon for a Jagger Firkus or a Yanni Newman, I think you look at moving those guys just because it does you at some point to have them just die on the vine with the Firebirds, or you run the risk of them plateauing just playing in the AHL, and you just never have the opportunity to bring them up in a serious way and give them a serious shot, then I think you have to move guys like that. And I think that that's kind of the situation or the scenario that we'd be looking at with the Kraken. So if the Kraken are looking at trades to bring in top six winger types, I think it would make the most sense to kind of sell high on the prospect value of a Jagger Firkus or a Yanni Newman, because realistically, especially if you're bringing in a top end winger, you're just not going to be giving them opportunities anytime soon. And it's in their best interest to go somewhere and have that opportunity.
Yeah, with you on that 100%. And as much because I love Yanni Newman as a prospect,
I do too.
I'd be so excited about the prospect of him playing with the Kraken and bringing some much needed goal scoring. But look, if he's not going to be a full-time NHLer next season with real opportunity, you've got to trade him now. Now, I think we touched a little bit on this question here from Paul. Why is there a hesitation to play the Kraken's own developed players? They seem stuck striving for mid-tier goals, unwilling to risk the upside versus limiting risk. And we touched on a little bit, but basically they're trying to sneak into the playoffs, and it's really hard to properly develop players when development isn't your number one priority.
Right. When you're trying to be a playoff team, and that is definitely what the Kraken are trying to be. That's the one consistent thing they have communicated to us for many seasons now, is that they care more about NHL success now than they care about the development of the young guys. It just means that you have one, maybe two development spots on your NHL roster where you can have somebody out there who is going to be making rookie mistakes, who's going to be a little bit up and down over the course of a season, who's going to hit a rookie wall at some point from playing an now 84 game NHL season, right? Like that is just going to happen. And when you're trying to win now and you're trying to be a competitive playoff team, especially when you're not talking about, say, top 3 overall picks in a draft where they're kind of so skilled they can make up for that. When you're talking about true developing players, you just tend not to have coaches that want to run with those guys. You tend not to want to have too many of them on the ice for too long of a period of time. And it just means you just can't develop them. And that's basically what's been happening with the Kraken for a while now, is the fact that they've been trying to be competitive. It's meant that they've only had 1 or 2 opportunities each year for a young player to come in and get any sort of decent role. And therefore, as you know, the prospects pile up at the AHL level, they're just not really able to graduate beyond that.
Yeah, and so that's just part of the trade-offs that the team is making. Next question here from Sam. Sam, looks like I was 1 of 7, potentially 1 of 8 on my preseason prediction. So it'll be interesting when you recap your way too early picks from this season in August. Yeah, I mean, we might have whiffed on a fair amount as well. So we'll see this summer when we go back and look at them. But hope you had a good stream with the Silvertips winning the WHL championship, Mietin winning playoffs MVP, and DuPont bolstering the hype for his upcoming draft year. My question is this: what would be your rankings of all the CHL exceptional status players coming specifically out of their draft year? And where would you currently rank DuPont amongst them? I'd personally rank them 4th behind only the Connors and Tavares. So Dylan, I'm really interested in your rankings here of the exceptional status players. So there are 9 of them, right?
Yeah, I think so. I have a list of them, but I don't have like a number of how many there are. But yeah, it's an interesting one, especially because like it's like when they were coming out of their draft, right? Like,
so you have to have a little bit of like remembering kind of where they were. But all of these players were within our hockey memory of our time following the sport anyway.
Yeah, and I think that DuPont does belong in the, first overall pick kind of guaranteed camp, right? And that's where, Connor McDavid, there was zero question he was going to be the first overall pick. John Tavares, there was zero question he was going to be the first overall pick. Bedard, there was zero question that he was going to be the first overall pick. Aaron Ekblad, like, I think people forget that he was an exceptional player status as a defenseman, as a defensive defenseman. I mean, that's one of the things that's like really unique, is that Aaron Ekblad was one of those players, and ended up being the first overall pick, won the Calder Trophy as an NHL rookie. So I think you're looking kind of in that range. It's also tough because we haven't seen Landon Dupont's draft year yet, right? So like we have to go based off of his seasons at this point compared to some of these other guys. And I think Landon Dupont honestly has passed a lot of what these guys were able to do in their kind of D-2 years, right? Like D-1 year. So it's a little hard to rank him, because we're essentially having to rank him based off of all of these players, what should have been their rookie CHL year, but they were above it. But I think Landon Dupont is somewhere in that top 4. Things get a little murky. I don't know that anybody as a pure CHL player can pass John Tavares for me. Like the original was kind of the best. I think that like he's kind of forever going to be number 1 for me as far as that actual CHL production and just the way he looked playing in that league with Oshawa. But yeah, I think Landon Dupont's definitely up there. I'll give you a better ranking next offseason after we see Dupont actually play this draft year.
Okay. Well, I didn't want to duck the question at all. Not saying that you were, but I did do a quick ranking, at least based on just like the kind of what they were thought of at the draft. I'd say McDavid won, because with Tavares, everyone knew he'd be great, but McDavid still, everyone kind of figured he'd be generational, and he ended up being. So McDavid 1, Tavares 2. I'd say Bedard 3, Dupont 4, but Dupont's at a disadvantage for all the reasons you just mentioned. Then a fairly big drop off. Then Ekblad 5, still very highly thought of, but it's like, a level.
It's so tough with a defensive defenseman at like 17. It's like, what do you do with that? Like, he looks great.
I remember there was some talk about like whether he'd be picked there at 1 or by a different team. Then I'd say Misa, then Wright, then Veleno, and then Day.
Yeah, Sean Day being at the bottom, followed by Veleno, is kind of the easiest thing.
Those are easy,
unfortunately. Yeah. And yeah, I'd have Shane Wright down there too.
Yeah, the fact he fell to 4 is kind of evidence enough there. All right, next question here from Eric. Based on your idea of what this team's identity is, who on the current roster fits that identity and who does not? So as far as what the team's identity is, our idea of it, and it's what they've more or less told us, which is Lane Lambert style defensive hockey. For a while, we had no clue what the team's identity was, but it does feel like they have picked one. It's not the identity I would be going for if I was in charge. It's not at all what either of us would have chosen, but that's what they've gone with. So given that identity, who on the current roster fits it and who does not?
Matty Beniers fits it. Campo Caco, I think, fits it pretty well. I think, Adam Larson fits it. I think that the returns are starting to diminish there, but he at least fits it. You know what I mean? Like, it's one of these kind of interesting ones. Look, Brandon Montour fits it, but I think Brandon Montour is like a chameleon who could fit any system anywhere, right? He's just one of those kind of guys where he's going to be an above average player anywhere he goes. I think Jordan Eberle fit this Lambert system of kind of counterattacking better than he's fit anything before. So I guess I'd say Jordan Eberle. But really, it's not a deep list.
Yeah, I mean, well, I did kind of a whole list with just everybody on the roster, and I kind of sorted them into the 2 camps. I'd say Bobby McMahon, depending if he comes back, but Bobby McMahon would be a fit. I think Tolvanen fits it okay.
Yeah,
he can fit anything though. Guys like Ryan Winterton, Ben Myers, Oscar Fisker Molgaard, Jacob Melanson, like those guys, the bottom 6 guys.
Well, and that's what's tough about it though, is because they all play like traditional bottom 6 guys, and the system just calls for a traditional bottom 6. Like, what bottom 6 do those guys not fit?
That's true. They would fit in a lot of different ways. It's system. Yeah. That's a good one. Yeah, I'd say Jamie Alexiak. Again, the returns weren't like great, but I think the style of play fits. Ryan Lindgren, same thing. The returns weren't great, but I think the style of play fits. The players just maybe not good enough. As far as the ones that clearly don't fit, I would say Chandler Stevenson.
Yep.
As much run as he gets, as much usage as he gets, I don't think that type of player is a fit. Guys like Yanni Newman, I'd throw Berkeley Catton in there. I think he's, again, can fit well enough in any system, but I don't think it's a good fit for what ideally he could be. And then Shane Wright, because he's the kind of guy who
Mhm.
just needs to be given free reign. So that's another one. Also, Vince Dunn,
Vince
I
Dunn
think, is
for
a
sure. I
backup.
was waiting. I was like, okay, if you don't say Vince Dunn absolutely did not fit at all in the Lane Lambert system. And that's why I am kind of more open to the idea of trading him this offseason than I ever have before, is because it was just so obvious that it was taking away a lot of what makes Vince Dunn a special player playing in this Lane Lambert system. And the easiest thing to look at is just the production. 44 points in 81 games. I mean, that's tough production for him, given what we've seen him do in a crack in the sweater.
Yeah, because he likes to move the puck up the ice with risky passes, out of the D zone and stuff. And that system is designed to kind of limit that risk and take away what Dunn does best. And so it's just not a good fit. Also, Riker Evans, I would throw in there, but I think everybody can kind of see that and knows that at this point. So yeah, I still think this system fits the current roster they have the best out of anything you could choose, but the current roster just isn't good enough and will never be good enough. So why are you trying to fit it? But anyway, that's
Yes,
that's kind of my
I
breakdown on which
know.
players fit and don't.
Yeah, I would say that Jared McCann doesn't fit it as well. Like, again, he's kind of like, because he just has that shot and that scoring ability and everything, and it's tough because of the injuries that he had to deal with all through this last year. But it did feel like, again, at times Jared McCann was not the same dangerous type of player that he has been in the past.
Yeah, I could see that. I do think he's the type of player though that is going to fit decently
Kind
well
of plug
in
him in
whatever, because
anywhere,
he's
yeah.
just such a smart player and versatile
Yeah.
and stuff. Um, Next question from Robert. The end of this is funny. Do you feel that the Kraken are a physical team, and should we be more physical? Go Ducks. Now,
Okay.
maybe Robert, because at the time was referring to the
Ducks were
Golden
still
Knights
in it.
Ducks series that was going on right there. But I had to include it because it was part of the question. So, Dylan, do you think the Kraken are a physical team, and should they be more physical?
I think last year's rendition of the Kraken is the most physical that we've ever seen from them. I think that they are physical enough. Uh, there's room for them to be more physical, particularly in the defensive zone. And this is the one thing that I would say is, with this Lane Lambert system, where you want to try to keep games low event and you want to try to grind things out and, take your counter attacking opportunities and stuff. I think the blue line for the Kraken should be more physical. It should be more about tying guys up in the corner, tying up the puck below the goal line. There should be a lot more of those board battles initiated where the offense really has to fight through you. The problem is the D that the Kraken have right now are just not kind of rangy enough to play that way. Like, one of the underrated aspects that good physical defensemen have or need to have in the National Hockey League to be like at the top end of being a defensive physical defenseman is skating and a closing ability, right? So you don't necessarily need to be the fastest guy out there, but you need to have a really quick first 2 or 3 strides. And you look at the Florida Panthers defensemen, you look at like a Nico Mikkola or an Aaron Ekblad or any of those guys, right? They're not necessarily the fastest guys out there, but boy, when they decide to put their foot in the ground and take that first stride up the ice, they can close a gap very fast and then be physical with somebody, right? Be right on top of them. And Adam Larson, Jamie Alexiak, Ryan Lindgren for sure, they don't really have a great closing ability. And so I think it limits their ability to tie up players physically in the defensive zone and also correct on mistakes, because there are going to be times where you go to tie up a player, the puck still gets free, and now you need to get back into position because that puck is being moved by the offense, and the Kraken also struggle there. So I think their issues with being physical are on the defensive side of things, and it's not so much that they aren't big enough or strong enough or necessarily have the mentality to be physical. I just think that they're not kind of quick enough on their feet to always be physical in the ways that they should be.
And that's an interesting point, and I hadn't thought about that considering my answer to this question, because I was thinking about once they're in position and stuff, and I was thinking still in front of both nets. I think there's some
There
physicality
is some room
left
for
to be
that, yeah.
desired, or at least not consistently. And it's the kind of thing that I think, given the talent deficit you have and Lane Lambert's demanding style of play, it's the kind of thing that I think really just wore off by the end of the season, because I think everyone was just exhausted with it. But certainly at the end of the season, during that rough stretch post Olympic break, there were so many moments where it's like you see a defenseman in front of the net just not putting a body on someone. It's like it's the lack of will right there. They're
Mhm.
there. they have the ability to do it. They're just not doing it. And they usually have size. It's Jamie Alexiak or it's Adam Larson, right? So I think there is that still to be desired. But I think a lot of it just comes from having, as you said, more speed or just more skill, just better players. And that's going to allow you to do that. But yeah, I think there's room to grow there, but it's certainly not the number one priority. There's others that you would address first on the triage list. Next, we have a couple questions from Chuck. First one, when I look at the Flyers, I see a team that, like Seattle, doesn't or can't rely on major stars. Even Konechny is a point per game player. Like the Kraken, they were shot challenged on offense, but they allowed almost 5 fewer shots on goal per game than the Kraken. They still produce strong shot quality while suppressing opponent shot quality. Do you think that's the kind of profile the Kraken could have had under Rick Tocchet and his system, or does Philadelphia simply have better personnel to play that low event style? Now, I think Philadelphia is a very interesting comparison team for the Kraken. I'm glad you brought this up, Chuck, but I'm going to let Dylan have the first shot at this because I know, Dylan, you are a big fan of Rick Tocchet and his system. So have at it.
I do think that a lot of what we saw the Flyers do this year kind of would have been what the Kraken would have tried to do. I think that particularly on the blue line, I think this goes really well with the stuff we talked about on the last question. The Flyers had a blue line better set up to play what Rick Tocchet would want than say the Kraken do. I don't think that, if the Kraken had Rick Tocchet, they would have made the second round the way the Flyers did, right? I just think that the Flyers team in a lot of ways has less up front than what the Kraken have, but they have a lot more on the back end. And I also think that they got better goaltending from Vladar this year than really what the Kraken were able to get as far as just a goalie making those kind of big saves. And not even big saves, but just being big in net and making consistent saves, we'll say. So I do think that they would have profiled similarly under Rick Tocchet, but I think that and they probably would have been a little bit better. Like I think Rick Tocchet's one of those coaches that just does legitimately add wins to the win column for a team, but I don't think that it would have made a large fundamental difference for the Kraken.
Yeah, in the big picture, I'm with you. I think the Kraken might have been a little better, but and Philly, I think they do have a roster that's better suited for that type of game. I also think they're due to regress next year. I think they were better than they should have been this season, and I think they're due for a step back next year. And so they're another team I think that's delusional about how good they actually are, and they're trying to kind of force their way into making the playoffs. And it worked this year. They got there. They even got to the second round because they had a weak first round opponent. But I think also the difference is the Kraken roster is worse and not as suited to play that style of game. Tocchett's a better coach. And also the Kraken have effort issues. They just have these effort issues that plague them forever, whereas this Flyers group doesn't seem to.
Right. And the other thing that the Flyers have that'll be interesting moving forward for them is Porter Martone. Because Porter Martone right now looks like the best player or at least has the highest potential of any player on the Flyers roster or the Kraken roster. And so that'll be something that'll be interesting for them to navigate, because he might be good enough that they decide, yeah, we should be pressing forward and trying to really accelerate things. But I don't know that he'll be good enough for them to actually do that, kind of falling into that trap where I don't feel like the Kraken kind of have a player like that right now.
No, I don't think they do. And I mean, hey, if they had finished with one fewer standings point
They would
last
have him.
season,
Yeah.
they would have him probably. So that's why it's important to, if you're going to be bad, be really bad. And then another question from Chuck: what is your roadmap for improving the penalty kill to be at least average? For starters, shouldn't Matty be playing a lot more on it and Stevenson a lot less? And then gave us a lot of good information here about face-off percentages and usage and everything for the penalty killers. But I think the general takeaway from that, and it's something we've looked about and talked about earlier in the season, is that Chandler Stevenson is not winning face-offs at a very good rate on the penalty kill, especially compared to other players. Like Matty Beniers is kind of lapping him as far as face-off success. So Dylan, I mean, basically general question, what do the Kraken need to do to improve the penalty kill? Because it was a bottom 10 unit all time in all of recorded NHL history, bottom 10 unit last season. That has to improve next year. How do you do it?
Yeah, I mean, there is definitely the forward stuff. It's been crazy to me that we've gone through multiple coaches now that seem unwilling to put Matty Beniers out there seriously on the penalty kill when he's just so tailor made for it. I mean, he was such a fantastic penalty killer at college, at World Juniors when he was underage, all of that stuff. Like he's just so built to play penalty kill minutes. It's remarkable to me that they won't just put him out there and make him the guy that the penalty kill works around, because I think he can be that player. You look at the expected goals allowed per 60 that Chuck also gave us from these guys. Matty Beniers nearly half of what Stevenson had, right? Like he's basically twice as good on the penalty kill, or at least the penalty kill is twice as good when Matty Beniers is out there than when Chandler Stevenson is out there. Why is Matty Beniers just not out there more? So I think there's lots of that you could look at with the forward group. Oscar Fisco Molgard was getting some penalty killing opportunities late last season. I think he is another player that should be kind of one of the guys that you build a PK forward group out of, or around, I should say. So there's some changes to be made up front there. But I this kind of comes back around to my answer for the physical defense, and a lot of what both you and I talked about when it came to the physical defense. That's also what needs to change. I think a lot of the problems for the penalty kill this year, it wasn't the forwards and it wasn't Chandler Stevenson or whoever it was that they had out there, Freddie Gaudreau or whoever. It's the fact that your defenders are just not quick. If the puck gets loose, if there's a rebound, they cannot jump on it as fast as you need them to. You look at a good PK unit, and again, it's those quick feet from defensemen to be able to close gaps, tie up the puck along the boards, and then you have somebody come in and help. It's the ability to jump on a rebound if it's there. All of that stuff. The Kraken defense is just not fast in quick movements, and I think that just costs them. It allows other teams with the man advantage in particular to be able to cycle that puck around in the offensive zone and stay there a lot longer than other teams allow offenses to go to work on the power play.
And I think it also makes it more difficult to make the other change that I would suggest, aside from the personnel changes, which it seems like we're pretty agreed on. I think the PK needs to be more aggressive, challenge other teams' power plays. We see the best PKs in the league are the ones that do get really aggressive, that don't give other teams a lot of time with the puck, that know those moments to get in there, challenge and pressure. And I think the forwards the Kraken have are very capable of that.
Yes.
Matty Beniers, Oscar Fisker Molgard, fantastic at that. Like they have the forwards to do that, but it's tough when your defensemen can't really do that into the corners and aren't really quick enough. So I think it makes it tougher to do that. But I think at the end of the day, you have to get more aggressive on the PK. We saw so much last season of them just kind of sitting back in their box, giving other teams tons of time and space to work with. And they're going to burn you at a certain point if you give them that much space. So, I mean, like how many real shorthanded chances or threats did the Kraken have all season?
None. Like they were never a danger.
And you compare that to previous seasons the Kraken had with largely the same personnel, and they were able to generate something shorthanded to at least keep teams on their heels. Not at all this past season. So that would be my other big thing, is get more aggressive and just get the personnel you need to get more aggressive.
Yeah, definitely.
All right, so now moving on to some bigger picture ownership type of questions here, as we're really going to shift gears. This one from Paul: what are the top 3 audit results you want? And so we did get the information about Sportsology being the firm that's going to conduct the Kraken audit. We looked into that a little bit this week, but we hadn't had the chance to talk about it on the podcast, but now we can. And then just Paul giving some examples of, say, a top 3 audit results you might want. Number 1, this team hasn't built a foundation for being a competitive playoff caliber squad. Number 2, you need an outside hire, not from the Francis branch, as either president of hockey ops or assistant GM. And number 3, the team wastes value by not trading free agents, before they're up, or keeping prospects in the minors too long. So those are just 3 potential, example audit results. But Dylan, I guess, what are the top 3 audit results you want to see? This was a difficult question for me to answer. I can jump in first if you want to think about it, but
I mean, like the number one thing that I have is just that, like, I guess it's like a 2-parter, so maybe it's 2 things, but it is the idea that, look, you need to take a step back and rebuild, right? And whether you feel like they ever built it all or not, they have to go through a traditional rebuilding process. You have to acquire talent through the draft. Like that is, I think, the number one result that I want. And then kind of building off of that is the idea that you're holding on to way too many guys from year 1 still. Like you have to move on from some of the players that you have that under 3 different coaches and 5 seasons have proven that they are just not good enough. And so the top 2 things that I want to see out of the audit would just be you have to do the traditional rebuilding process, and you have to move on from this player group that you have because it is just not good enough. You cannot come out here and keep saying that we are just a piece or two away from figuring it out when they have demonstrated time and time again that they are not that close at all. And so those would be the 2 things that, my third thing would be see points 1 and 2.
Yeah, no, I think that's a good answer there. And this is where it's difficult to answer this question, because there are, in my mind, 2 things, like key decision points that actually matter. And if those 2 aren't addressed one way or the other, nothing else is going to matter. And it seems to me like those 2 points are not going to be part of this audit. Because the audit, I mean, it says it will cover, like, roster stuff potentially and all this stuff. So that was a good sign to see. But to me, the only 2 things that really matter are A, what you were just talking about. What is the direction of this team? Do you take a step back? Do you go for it again? And B, who's going to be in charge of hockey ops going forward? Who's going to oversee everything in the grand strategy of all those? Those are the 2 important things that I think the team really needs to take a hard look in the mirror at and decide and make decisions there. And it seems like for both of those, they were already decided before the audit even began. At least from all the messaging we've seen, it sounds like, when I asked Todd Lywicki and Jason Botterill about, would you consider taking a step back if that's something that the audit shows would be best for the team long term? And their answer was, basically, we're not taking a step back. We like what we have in the group, and we're going to add to it. So they've made the decision there. And then as far as just who's going to be in charge of hockey ops going forward, it's Jason Botterill. The audit could find, the auditors independently could find, like, yeah, maybe you need someone who isn't from the Ron Francis branch, someone who, you might want to bring in an outside hire. They could tell the Kraken that. They're not going to do it. They've already decided Botterill is going to be the GM going forward. So the 2 decisions that actually matter here, as far as what the audit could tell them, they already made the decision before they let the audit begin. And I don't think that's a good way to operate, but that's what they've done.
Yeah, it's I don't really have anything to add other than to just build off of some of the points that we've already made many times in the past. I guess one of the things that I did recently was Julie and I went through and we looked at Vegas's year 1 roster again, and the amount of difference between the roster that they had when they won the Stanley Cup and that first season is remarkable, considering it's about the same time frame that we're looking at for the Kraken between their year 1 and now. And that Vegas group made the Stanley Cup Finals year 1, and they were still like, over the next 2 or 3 years, we need to completely turn this roster over and have it actually be a better team. Right?
Yeah.
Like, we talk about the trap that the Kraken fall into all the time of year 2 being a playoff team, and that caused them to be committed to this group way too much. They went to the Cup final and they were like, yeah, no, they're just not good.
This isn't good enough.
We still need to be better. Like, we got lucky that year. We just need to be better and do that and go out there and acquire franchise level players. And they have, and that ultimately was why Vegas was able to retool and get there. But it's crazy. It was like 3 or 4 guys from that year 1 team that actually won the Stanley Cup with Vegas, because Vegas was able to say, even though we are a playoff team every year, even though we went to a cup final, we know that there is more upside out there, and what it actually takes to be a true competitive team is greater than what we have right now. And that's what the Kraken need to really do when looking at this core group of players, is say, even though we had a single postseason run, it's just not good enough and we need to be better.
Yeah, because Vegas had that kind of band of misfits where you had 4 second lines or whatever you want to call it, 4 third lines. And that worked for them in year 1, but they knew that was not a sustainable strategy going forward. And so they went out and made bold moves to go get star players, Mark Stone, Jack Eichel.
Nobody was more aggressive than them.
Yep. And these are players the Kraken, at least for Jack Eichel, had the chance to go and get. I remember I wrote a written article back when we did written content in 2021 talking about how the Kraken needed to go get Jack Eichel and even trade away the number 2 pick that became Matty Beniers if necessary, to go get him. And that's just, again, Kraken have had the complete opposite mindset to Vegas since the team started. So that's the kind of thing you need to get. If you're not going to draft these players high, if you're not going to bottom out, you need to get Vegas level aggressive.
Right. And look, Vegas has made mistakes along the way. Tomas Tatar trade was a disaster for them.
Yeah.
But because they were so aggressive and they just kept going at it, as long as more of those hit than miss, you're fine.
I mean, even worse than the Tatar trade. Look at Nick Suzuki with Montreal. Right. Vegas drafted him and traded him away to go get Max Pacioretty to support the team right then. Like, that is a hell of a player. You know, potential Selke winner, near 100-point guy that you got rid of because you were being aggressive.
Right. If your center depth right now was Jack Eichel, Nick Suzuki, that team is winning every Stanley Cup, or at least they're in the mix for it. Right. Like, it's crazy. But that's the kind of boldness that you have to have if you're a front office, if your ownership group is to go ahead and make those deals. And yes, sometimes they are not going to work out and everybody's going to point at it and go like, oh, wow, they were the team that traded away Nick Suzuki. But you know what? They don't care because they won a Stanley Cup, right? They're in the Western Conference Final again. They've been there many times now, right? Like, this is one of those things where, like, that's at the end of the day what ultimately ends up mattering. And as much as people want to say, oh, you know, other GMs weren't as savvy for their expansion draft, and so they were set up with a better team and all of that stuff. Again, the team they ultimately won with was not the team that got on expansion draft day. Like, it just wasn't. And so I just think that bears repeating. I know not everybody wants to give credit, especially in this fan base, to Vegas and pay attention to that kind of stuff. But I do think that, like, they are the model for how to kind of deal with the situation that the Kraken find themselves in right now.
Yeah. And there are plenty of moves that Vegas has made or things that they've done. I mean, you can look at them just being docked a draft pick, the fact that, like, Carter Hart is,
they're still a mess of an organization.
But you look at the moves that actually put them in the position where they are now to build this core of players. And those aren't, like, you know, horrific morally or anything like that. Or, you know, you can do that without doing the extra stuff.
Exactly.
I mean, it'd be an interesting argument for Red Glare. Like, maybe you can't. Maybe you just have to go all in on being villain mode. I don't think. No,
I think you can. I think you can.
I think you can.
Decent people and also be aggressive and do the moves necessary. Treat it like a business, you know, and all of that.
Yeah. So next question from Landon, and this kind of speaks to the mindset thing too. And it might be a shorter answer because we've covered a lot of it already, but what do you think will be the thing that makes management wake up to the reality that the Kraken are bad and need to rebuild properly? Also, what's a guy need to do to get an ECH pin at a game? So I'll answer the second part first. See us, say hi. If you see us, say hi. I've got the pins in my backpack all the time. And if you don't see us, because we're in the press box a lot, send us a message. We'd be happy to come down, say hi, give you a pin, chat for a little bit. And that goes for everybody.
Yeah, that is the best way, is DM us on social media or Discord or something like that, so that we know that people want to meet us and hang out and stuff. And we're more than happy to come down for the press bridge and do that. Yeah, as for what it's going to take for ownership and management to kind of see it, all I could think of at this point is just more time, right? It's going to have to be maybe the fact that the Kraken aren't a playoff team by the time the Sonics come in, and they kind of get pushed to the back burner there. Like that's the only thing I could think of at this point, because all of the signs should have already been there. Like, they should.
You're basically reading from my notes here. I as sad as it is, I say I guess maybe 2 to 3 more years of failure is realistically what I think it would take, because I would have thought they would have seen everything they needed to by now. I don't know what more they could see at this point, and it doesn't seem to have sunk in. So,
yeah.
All right, so now we have a couple questions here on ownership. From Eric, is Samantha Holloway too involved with the team? And then from Let's Get Kraken, maybe I've missed it, but has Samantha Holloway spoken with the media at all, or has it just been Todd Lewicki? Seems really odd that 3 years in a row they keep basically saying and doing the same thing. Maybe the audit helps, but what is her plan, in her words, not Todd's? Need a real plan. So I guess we'll start with, is she too involved? It's really, really hard to know her level of direct involvement with the team, because it just comes down to so many conversations and stuff that we are just not privy to, that we can't know.
Yeah, all the meetings behind, closed doors and all of that kind of stuff. So yeah, I don't know that she's too involved. Obviously you have the financial backing of the team, which is where you want it to be. The fact that they have as much money as they need to go out there and do what they want to do when they want to. That's a big deal. She's involved, but yeah, I don't know that I would say she's too involved, because if she was, we would be hearing from her all the time and there would be a lot more public facing, and we would have a lot more of an idea of, oh, so and so was fired or so and so was kept because of ownership, which we get from other teams, right? I mean, we just saw that with Chris Knobloch being fired. Basically, just Daryl Katz, the owner of the Oilers, was just like, yeah, I just can't stand looking at this guy anymore. And then he was gone, right? Like, we don't get that kind of stuff with Samantha Holloway. That to me is an owner that's too involved. Or anything the Vancouver Canucks do, right, is an example of an owner being too involved. So I don't think that Samantha Holloway is too involved. As for why we haven't heard from her and stuff, and why we always kind of hear from Lewicki, and Lewicki seems like the one that's involved, is keep in mind, Lewicki that's his job. His job is, as CEO, to represent ownership in the day-to-day runnings of the organization. And to be the spokesperson of the organization. Like, him being the person that we talk to at these press conferences and that we publicly see and hear from, at like a 10-to-1 ratio over Samantha Holloway, that is literally why his position exists and why he specifically was the guy hired for that, because he loves to be out there in front of everybody. He loves to talk. He's good at it, right? Like, he can get a crowd fired up really well. So that's kind of why that situation exists. It's literally, that's how the organization is set up and how most organizations would be set up.
Right, exactly. We don't have her plan in her words because she has appointed Todd Lewicki to do the job of communicating that plan. And that is a very normal thing that happens in so many organizations of so many different kinds. So that's basically it.
Yeah. Again, when we do see the owners as the ones out there doing the press conferences and everything, usually it is examples of owners that are too hands-on, that then are the ones kind of meddling in things, and you get that overreach.
Yeah, you don't want to see the owner's face and hear the owner's words too much.
Exactly.
You really don't. And you compared it to Vancouver, and we'll kind of skip over to this question here from Sarah, who is from Vancouver. You talking about the Kraken ownership's expectations versus where the team is worries me extra because of my local franchise's cursed history. Is there any reassurance you can offer right now, or are the Kraken destined to be as unfortunate as the Canucks? I'll start by saying the Canucks are worse. There is a level of drama and ownership involvement in a way you don't want, that you just talked about, that Seattle just doesn't even come close to, just doesn't have in the same way or level that Vancouver does.
Yeah, exactly. I think that, any issues with the Kraken from an ownership perspective are them being maybe too passive, right? Like, not being aggressive enough, everything that we just talked about with the Vegas thing. Whereas, yeah, in Vancouver, it's specifically, you have somebody that wants to be too involved, that lets emotion get in the way too frequently. Lots of things like that, none of which we've seen from this Kraken ownership group.
Yeah, and I think it was a good point as far as being too passive. It's really just, I think they did bring in somebody to run the entirety of the whole operation in Ron Francis, and they let him do his thing, and they waited as long as they possibly could to make that change, I think. And it just, they happened to entrust the wrong person. And so when you do that, then you do need to like step up and be more involved and realize, okay, this is the wrong guy. Things are going really bad. But ideally, what you do want ownership to do is just appoint someone and let them cook. So that's, they had the right strategy from the beginning. They just entrusted the wrong person. So this one from Let's Get Kraken. What realistically happens if next year goes about the same or worse than this year while the ownership is awarded the Sonics? Do they put the Kraken on the back burner and remain status quo, or do they clean house / purge the roster and refocus to build a proper, sustainable winner? So Dylan, let's forecast a year in the future. Mm-hmm. If all of this happens again, what do you think we're talking about right now? May 19th, 2027.
I've been trying to ask myself this question so many times, and it's easy to ask myself the question. It's hard to come up with an answer, because I just genuinely don't know. I would have thought that this year was enough for them to kind of just be like, yeah, we need to reset things. But because the division was so bad, because they were in it until there was only a couple weeks left, they really seem to have let that dilute themselves. Next year, I don't think that scenario plays out. I have to assume that if they're, again, a bottom 5-ish team, that there would be more change, particularly because like by that time, a Sonics announcement is, pretty likely. They're not going to be playing necessarily. They'll probably be pushed out another year as far as actually playing games, but that would, I think, make the organization maybe even more desperate to get the Kraken right on track as the last season before the Sonics truly come back. So I don't think they'd be put on the back burner right away in that way. I think there would be an even heavier mandate, and that's what scares me, is that they might look at it and like Jason Botterill might have a runway or a leash long enough to get him to Sonics tip off in, fall 28. And that's the thing that I'm really curious about. But the bottom line is I I don't know, because to me, so much has already been there that should have led to a cleaning of house and led to a true change, that I physically cannot put myself in the mindset of how you could even get this far, much less what you could do next year.
Yeah, same. And that's where when I was thinking of my answer here, and maybe just what's happened over the last couple months has just left me kind of so jaded to this point. But if I'm looking ahead realistically based on what I've seen, because all I can use is the past to inform the future, I think Botterill would stay the GM. Maybe they fire the coach again. Maybe they do that. I think we're told about another prolific offseason and promise that they're, going to try this whole thing again and add to the core that they love and that they have. And that Berkeley Catton took another step forward. And I think they might trade away any of like Dunn, McCann, or Wright that's not already gone. I think they'll try and go for the big trade swing or signing or whatever. Just it's going to be a repeat. And look, every year I've thought this has to be the last straw that leads to real change. Every year it's not. So I think, unfortunately, we're kind of stuck in this loop until further notice.
Yeah. Until they prove to us that they're willing to get out of it, it is this.
Yeah. And so now we get to a couple questions. And man, I think this says a lot that we received these two questions. These are two of the first ones that we got, and I'm just going to lump them together here. This one from Josh. As a frustrated fan who's been watching every game since day one, what reasons can you give me to continue to cheer for and support this team? Why should I continue, in all caps, to watch? What is something to look forward to seeing next season? And then from the janitor, is there realistically anything to be excited about for this team in the next few years, in your opinion? Or if I was a new hockey fan looking for a team to root for, how would you sell me on the Kraken? So let's try and find a way to sell this here, as the organization loves to do. But we'll start, I guess, with like Josh's question about why should I continue to watch, and what is something to look forward to seeing next season?
Yeah. Why do you continue to watch? It's because you're a fan, right? And it is hockey, and it's in Seattle, and it gets to be your team. And as all fans of teams that are struggling, this is something certainly you and I can relate to on the NFL side of things, and then various other sports. Rooting during those lean years, yes, your interest is going to wane. You're not going to be as diehard. You don't maybe watch all the games on TV like you used to. All of that stuff happens. But the reason that you keep pressing forward is because it is your community. It is part of your identity. It is what you want. And then once that team does turn it around, oh, it tastes so much sweeter, right? Like you do genuinely feel invested in that emotional release that you get once that team finally does turn that corner and becomes good and gets to be in those conversations, is so glorious, and it's so much fun, and it has been made because you have gone through those difficult times. I mean, it's not dissimilar from like the arc in a movie where you have to go through ups and downs with a character in order for you to emotionally buy in, for you to properly empathize with them, and then have the big release of the climax. Like that is how story structures are built. Novels, films, all music is built this way, right? And sports is really no different when you think of it from like that entertainment and emotional buy-in standpoint. And so you have to keep going through the rough years. Again, you distance as much as you need to maintain good mental health and all of that stuff. That is totally fine. But I think you have to continue and stay committed, because it makes the payoff so much better. And that is it's just one of those things in life that you just got to do.
Yeah. And I think for next season specifically too, the Kraken do have young players that could be part of, look, even if they stay in this like loop and cycle for another 5 years, and they don't really figure it out for another 7 years or something like that, there's still players like Berkeley Cat and Matty Beniers, those guys could be, and some of the prospects coming up now too, like Molgard, who could be there when everything like turns around and gets good. And you will have followed those stories throughout the entire time. And so that's why, like, I mean, you look at this past season that just happened, right? It sucked. Like it sucked. But if Berkeley Catton is part of the solution in 5 years or whatever going forward, and you saw his rookie season, you kind of saw him be as snake bitten as he was to start things off, but then figure it out and really gain his confidence, you'll look back and remember that as something cool that you got to see. And I think there's going to be a lot of those moments next season as well. And as far as selling it for a new hockey fan, I think that case is even a little easier because the Kraken are a new team. They're the newest franchise, and I know Utah, whatever, but they had a team beforehand with all the players that you could follow beforehand. Like, you are getting in as close to the start as you can get. And look, they may not be good right now, but that's what makes the future success that much sweeter. And so if you do want to root for a newer team where you could brush up on the history pretty easily of the Kraken, like, it's not that hard because they haven't been around too long. You can get up to speed real fast. Pick them. Like, they're the team to go for. And yeah, like, they're not good right away. And I guess if you want someone who's good right away, sure, go for somebody else. Like, that this isn't the fit for you. But I think a lot of fans like to kind of grow with the team like that, especially a newer team. And if you look at the other newer team too, it's Vegas. And like, you've already gotten in after the first Stanley Cup. Like, I don't know, I wouldn't want that as a fan. So, and then in the long term too, like, teams can turn it around so fast. Like, look at where San Jose was when the Kraken came into being in 2021. They had a bunch of terrible anchor contracts, no hope for the future, like none in the pipeline, so to speak, of nothing. And then 5 years later, they're like, have maybe the brightest future of any team in the league. Like, it can happen relatively pretty quick.
Right. And, again, go back to the last stuff we talked about with ownership. That was because ownership realized, okay, this, what we're doing isn't working. We need to make a change. And they did bring in the right person and then went right back to being hands off. Like, that's one of the things with the Ron Francis thing of, look, they brought in they had the right strategy in place. They just entrusted the wrong guy. That happens. Right? Nobody gets it right 100% of the time. What's important is to recognize that it's not working, make the change, but stick with that general philosophy. And I think the Sharks are a great example of that, of recognizing once something isn't working, making the change, then they kind of made the wrong change and then they corrected again. And now they have Mike Greer. They have this plan in place. They were able to tank properly. And now they have the most exciting player in the National Hockey League, in my opinion, in Macklin Celebrini, that they get to build around and an unbelievably promising future. But it is because their ownership group was able to at some point recognize that things needed to change and make that call.
Right. And I think the Kraken ownership group is capable of that, even though they haven't done it yet.
Right.
So now let's get into the offseason, the moves, the trades, the free agent stuff. And answers to this might be a little shorter because, again, as we talked about with the big picture thing, a lot of it doesn't matter if the team doesn't just make the big decision points about where to go. But we'll start with one, and this is a very general one. So I can't spend all the time on this because I could spend 2 hours on this, and I have on our Armchair GM streams. Actually, if you were a GM, what moves would you make in the summer? So I'll keep it quick. If I was GM, it would be a lot different. It would look a lot different than what is actually going to happen. I would start by letting all the UFAs walk. I would trade McCann and Dunn for the best blue chip prospects I could get. I'd trade some depth guys like, Gaudreau or whatever for anything to open up spots for the younger players. And next year would be a real transition year type of season where you're realistically probably finishing bottom 5 in the league, but you want the younger guys to take a step forward. So I've opened up lots of spots for them, clear out guys whose contracts are expiring soon.
Yeah, no, I mean, if I'm GM, I'm gutting this team. I'm doing a lot of roster turnover. I'm giving opportunities to all the guys, the AHL level that we talked about earlier at the start of the podcast. Like, that's the direction I'm going. I'm really trying to see what do I already have? What am I able to add in terms of young players? And if it doesn't look like enough, well, then look, I'm going to be a bottom 3 team probably anyway. So I can go ahead and start that rebuilding process.
Yep. And then this one from Mark, talking about maybe trading some of these guys away. Can they trade Vince Dunn and Jared McCann, yet still try to sell that they are going for it? And that's a very good question, Mark, because it's something I've wondered about too, because the Kraken, again, they're going to try and sell that they're going for it. Like, they've made that messaging very clear, but can they do that if they move Dunn and McCann, or even just one of the two, because those are two of your better players? And it's interesting because they do need to make calls on those players. They do have 1 year left on their deal now. And so you either have to be confident they're going to re-sign, or you have to look to move them maybe this offseason. And so I was actually going to ask Jason Bottrell about this at the season end presser, but they ended it right before my question. I think, if you don't mind if I start on this,
go for it.
Like, I think it would be a tough sell, especially if they move both of them. But the idea is they would get similar caliber players back for them. And I think that's what they're going to be looking for in any McCann or Dunn trade, is to get NHL ready guys who can help the roster right away. And so I think part of the sell would be like, okay, yeah, we traded McCann and Dunn, but look at this guy we got back. Like, if you get, another like scoring forward trying to do a like for like type of thing, you're like, well, okay, we got in new players. Like, these are the guys that are going to lead us to things. McCann and Dunn just weren't the right guys. But like, and I think I would be surprised if McCann was a Kraken in October. I really would. Like, looking at it, I think they're going to move at least one of these two guys. But I think also at the end of the day, like, as far as how they're going to sell it, they're going to do what they're going to do, and they're going to call it a success. Like, I really just think that's kind of where we're at. Like, they're going to trade McCann for something. They'll bring in like a Jordan Kyrou level player and another middle six forward, and they'll say that was a great and prolific offseason, and they've got a real shot at the playoffs despite not really being any better. That's kind of where I think this is going.
Yeah, it's 1,000% where it's going. And as far as like the part of the question of like, can they try to go for it and still move those guys, it all depends on who they get back for them.
Yeah.
If you move them for comparable level guys, like a McCann for Kyrou, yeah, because nothing essentially changed. Like, you could still go for it. It all comes down to what the team wants to do and the messaging around it. But I think that there is room for that to happen.
Yeah. So this one from Rob, Four Horsemen. Please explain the trade package we will send to Ottawa for Tim Stützle this offseason and why it makes great sense for the Kraken. He has no trade protection that I can see. Yeah, he doesn't have any trade protection yet. This one I struggled with because, I mean, I could say, it's Tim Stützle for Jacob Melanson, 1-for-1, and it makes great sense for the Kraken for obvious reasons. I could not find a way that this trade realistically makes sense for both teams, mostly because for Ottawa, why would you do it? Why would you move a 24-year-old first line center on a good contract unless you are getting somehow someone better back? And so if I'm Ottawa, I mean, if I like have to move him, just for some reason I have to the Kraken, because other teams could beat this offer, but it would start with like Beniers and Catton and McCann, and probably the 7th overall pick as well. Like, that's, I guess, the trade package. If I have to pick one, it's Beniers, Catton, McCann, and 7th overall. And I guess if I have to say why it makes great sense for the Kraken, it's because all 4 of those pieces, each of them are unlikely to be as good as Tim Stützle is. If I'm Ottawa, I still wouldn't do it. But like, maybe you could make the argument it makes you better now because you just have more depth, right? You get more guys and you fill out the forward depth. I don't know.
That's the only thing that makes it make sense for Ottawa in any way, is that it's one player out from multiple players in. And one of the things that they're struggling with is that they have an okay-ish core. It's just they don't have enough around them. And so if you're moving a Stützle, it would have to be like, I was thinking like a McCann, Vince Dunn plus like a Yanni Newman package, right? Where you're getting kind
which
of
would be enough,
on
but that kind of thing.
Both sides of things. You're getting another good blue liner you can send out there and have, on your second pairing, Vince Dunn would fit in great there. And then you get a McCann who can sort of replace Stützle's scoring to an extent. And then you're also getting somebody else that'll be a great middle six winger for you, because you kind of don't have enough of those. But it would take something like that.
Yeah. So I'm sorry, Rob. It's not going to happen.
But
that's my best attempt at answering your question. This one from Juan.
As great as it would be for marketing the deep dive to have Tim Stützle play for the Kraken, the most notorious diver in the National Hockey League.
Yes. Although, was Mason Marchment fun? No, we could have done that with Mason Marchment, but it wasn't fun. At least Stützle's a really good player.
Yes, on the deep dive logo there, we just put Tim Stützle's face and the little diving mask on the octopus. It'd be great. It writes itself.
Yeah, that would really ingratiate us to him there as he comes to this new market. Yeah. Okay. Anyway, from Juan, how could management be better at attracting players to want to come play for us? And this is it. I think we addressed this a little bit earlier like a couple months ago or something. But I think the number one thing has to be just winning, building a
Yeah,
winning team,
always
and
number one.
a team that comes off as having a chance to win and does not look like a dysfunctional organization. They're not there yet, but that's the most important thing. And then other than that, I think there's three factors that are preventing players this from being a desirable destination. And it's one, cost of living; two, bad weather in the winter. Summers are gorgeous, but players go elsewhere in the summer, most of them anyway. Not Bobby McMahon.
Mhm.
And then number three, just lack of nightlife, lack of kind of things to do. And this is something even Elliot Friedman talked about, just like the lack of nightlife around. For younger players, that can be tough.
Yeah. Yeah, we've touched on basically all of these things already, but that is basically it. There's not too much that management can do other than like legitimately picking a direction, and you either sell them on the fact that you're winning currently or you sell them on the idea that look, we're taking the steps necessary to win in the future that are steps that a player actively understands. Like, look, we're rebuilding. We've got this fantastic young player. We want you to help shepherd them into the league and then grow with them, and we'll get there, right? Like similar to why teams like the Sharks, the Ducks, these kind of rebuilding teams are able to add and bring in guys. It's not just because they're in like California, it's because they also can say, look, we have the pieces. It's just going to take them a year or two, but then we're there. And guys can get on board with that. I think the Kraken try to do that. And, Matty Beniers is just not as exciting as Macklin Celebrini or Leo Carlson. And that becomes a problem for you.
Yeah, and you're competing against other teams that do have that. But I like this question from Commodore Spidlap, kind of related. How would you sell Seattle, the city, to an upcoming free agent or traded player? Or like, what's your favorite thing to do around town? So this is just personally how we would sell the city of Seattle. I mean, we
Yeah.
both do live here. We both
Mhm.
like it. I know it doesn't have the beach for you that SoCal has, Dylan, but how would you,
Yeah.
aside from that, I know you couldn't sell anyone on Seattle over LA, but how would you sell Seattle to an incoming player?
Yeah,
And what
I
do you
think
like
you
to
have
do
to.
around town?
Right. Yeah. I think you have to hit on the idea that it does kind of skirt the line and have the best of both worlds in the sense of you are in a large metropolitan hub and you have advantages to that, such as, look, it's anything that you want to trick out your house or your car or anything like that. It's easily accessible because you're in a major shipping hub. All of that stuff kind of exists, right? Any of the luxury items that you're interested in, because look, these are millionaires. This is the life that they kind of live. You're going to be able to do that. You also have a wide range of geography in which you can live and have access to. If you're a lake guy, there's lake property. If you're a forest guy and you want that privacy and isolation, you have that. If you're big into living in a luxury penthouse apartment in an urban center, you can easily have that. And the idea that you can have all of those things in a 30 to 40-minute drive from where anywhere you have to be for your job day to day, that exists here. And that is something that genuinely makes the PNW or Seattle specifically unique. And that's the thing that I would most try to hit upon with these guys is just like, look, depending on how outdoorsy you are or how big city you are, there's an easy section of Seattle, like we'll just go and show you places here, right? In a way that like when you're talking about playing in some other big cities or then in small markets, you don't have both of those things to kind of draw people in with, whereas Seattle has both of those.
Right, and it is a good mix there, and that is the kind of thing I would maybe lean into is the outdoor stuff if players like that. Now, personally, I have very different tastes and ideas of fun than most NHL players, I think. So, and I think you do need to tailor it to specific players if you're trying to attract someone. And I do think the team is actually trying to get better at that.
I do
I've got
too.
reason to believe the team is working on that and trying to improve there. Personally, like if you want my personal answer, like I would really sell the outdoors stuff and especially like the Burke Gilman Trail, Sammamish River Trail, if I'm looking for like my own experience, because I love that. I love going out on the trail. I would say, hey, you can even rollerblade out there. They're hockey players. I'm sure they could rollerblade, just like I love to do, right? If you're asking just what's my favorite thing to do around town, that would be it. You can go out rollerblading. You won't get recognized, well, maybe by me, but I won't bother you.
Yeah.
I'll just give you a thumbs up. And yeah, I mean, like Elliot Friedman reports, lack of nightlife, stuff like that. That's not really my scene, so I don't have an idea of how good or bad it is. It's not something I like to do. And it sounds like they don't need to sell the team or the city, I mean, to players who are older and have families. It sounds like the
the
guys with
family
families
guys love it. Yeah.
So that it already kind of sells itself. You don't need to worry about that. But then it's like when you talk about for the younger guys and wanting to, kind of have nightlife and stuff like that, I'm the wrong person to ask as far as how to sell
Same.
that. Not my scene at all. And I think same for you.
Yeah,
but I enjoyed that question.
I was gonna say my nightlife is usually it's staying in and watching a movie, but if that's not it, then look, it is a great city for like if you're a Magic the Gathering player. Right? I spent a lot of time at game stores, LGSs. That's fantastic. I don't know how many young NHL players though are that interested in that sort of nightlife vibe.
Yeah, we'll have to do some big interview thing if we hear that the Kraken player is interested in that. We'll have to have you go in and talk to him. Yeah. So now a couple massive questions here that I do think we're going to have to, answer more simply than they could be. But Sean saying, put together your best team for if the Kraken really are going to stick with the very bad decision of going for it again next season. Try to create the best team in that scenario for longer than one season term success. Seems like that will be quite the challenge. This is something I could easily do on an armchair GM stream and get like an actual team together. But as we're already at an hour 20 on this podcast, I don't have the time to do that. But to do it justice would take like an hour. I guess the general idea for me is to get players who are like under 27 who are also good now. And that way you can kind of do both. Like it's hard to do. Like if a Jason Robertson is available, like that's one that fits for now in the future. If you could pull off the miracle that Four Horsemen was asking about with Tim Stützle, that works for now in the future. Matvei Michkov, like if he moves, boom, there's someone right there that fits the timeline. So that would be the idea, I think.
Yeah. I'm at the point where it's a clean house, true rebuild. You're targeting Landon DuPont, you're targeting an RJ Celebrity, you're targeting any of those guys. Like that to me is just genuinely the only way forward at this point.
But that doesn't fit the question, so I'm trying to work within the
and more power to you. But again, like with the limited time constraints and stuff, I just don't think it's possible.
Yeah, I mean, I do think there are ways you can do it. Oh yeah, this will be an armchair GM.
It would be, yes, you'd have to really get in and hit on like every analytics underrated guy. You'd have to find the ones that still have a little bit of upside there that you can milk and really play to the Lane Lambert system. You'd have to completely overhaul the D. Like you need a whole new blue line essentially.
Well, no, I think part of it also would involve getting rid of the coach and bringing in someone who plays a different style too. So that would be part of it, which they're not going to do. So this one from Seattle Kraken GM, given our addiction to your sage insights, I'm manifesting a 2-parter mailbag with a question. Sorry, no, we're doing the 1-part mailbag. It will take 15 to 20% of an episode to answer. What does this Kraken roster look like in 27-28? So the next season now, line by line, D pair by D pair, goalie by goalie, lots of key departures by then. I couldn't come up with a complete one, but I'm going to give it a shot. Go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say, maybe that is a question we save for later in the offseason.
Because I could do that. Yeah. But like on quick glance, here's what I can give you. Goalie by goalie is easy. Joey Decord starter, Nikke Koko backup. Boom.
Yep.
Got that. The blue line was tougher because I think Vince Dunn will be gone, but Montour, Larson, and Lindgren will probably still be around. And then probably
Fiddler. Well, maybe not Fiddler.
Yeah. So maybe one of those two guys. And then the other one is going to be someone you will have acquired later. As for the forward group, here's my 4 lines that I got. Ready? If we're continuing the path here. First line, Patton, Beniers, Kyrou.
Mm-hmm.
Second line, McMahon, O'Brien, Kakko.
Okay.
Third line, Tolvanen and Stevenson, Eberle. Eberle's still under contract there. And then fourth line, Winterton, Molgaard, Melanson.
Yeah. I think
so. That's my general guess.
Yeah. Julius Miettinen could be in the mix at that point.
I thought about him too. I just wasn't sure where to slot him in. Maybe in Tolvanen's spot if they don't bring him back.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right. This one from Nick. I think this is a fun question here. And there's 2 questions now we're getting about like Kraken history. Mm-hmm. Nick, what is the most consequential draft pick in Kraken history? Now, Nick gave me his choice, but put it behind like a spoiler thing on Discord. So I'll check it as soon as we answer, but I didn't want it to be influenced by his. But I'll let you take a shot at it first, Dylan. What is the most consequential draft pick in Kraken history?
It's so... there's different ways of looking at that, right? Like you could say Matty Beniers because not only was he first, but it also set the tone for the type of team that they tried to then build, right?
Right.
Was we have this responsible two-way center, but he's not going to be an offensive guy, and we're not going for this kind of flashy score a bunch of goals approach, right? With our first ever franchise player. So in a lot of ways, I think it's Matty Beniers, not for just being first, but because of what that first represents. Outside of that, I mean, I know people, right? The whole Lane Hudson thing is a big deal for lots of fan bases that they didn't take him, and of course, right? Like the Kraken were one of those teams where he goes right after, but the Kraken do take risks in the second round, and a lot of them have hit, obviously not to the level of Lane Hudson, but like Jagger Firkus and Yanni Newman and guys like that, Nick Coco, like the goalies and everything. I genuinely think the Kraken are one of the few teams in the second round that actually uses second round picks properly. So I don't want to get too on like, oh, it's, Goyette because they didn't take Lane Hudson, right? Like I know that's probably where you're going, but that's my thought on it.
Well, I was thinking there's two ways you can look at it. And that was one of the ways. Like, if you want to look at just how big of a difference it would have made to the team had they taken, say, the guy immediately after, then yeah, that's the biggest one because Lane Hudson goes the pick immediately out. The answer is round 2, pick 61, David Goyette, because Lane Hudson gets taken with the very next pick. But I don't know that the Kraken, I mean, clearly they didn't like enough of what they saw in Hudson because they passed on him 4 times in the second round. Like, I don't think it's realistic that they're gonna take him there. And so like, that's the thing. So you could make an argument for that. I think you could make a really good argument for that. Like, that's not a bad answer if you have that angle. The other one that I went with was Shane Wright because of the situation that kind of immediately that put them into in year 2, where they were trying to kind of juggle his development with the fact that they became a playoff team. And it just led to this whole situation that's kind of been hanging over their heads the entire time. Also with just the drama of it, right? The way he fell at the draft, the way that there are the headlines with that and everything. I think it has kind of set the tone or kind of colored their development and the issues with the team's development ever since. And so I think that was a consequential one. Plus, you could throw in the fact of, okay, if they just happened to, they were never going to, but if they happened to take the guy who got taken next in Cutter Gauthier, 30 goal scorer, the kind of player you'd have now. Don't know that he would have developed the same way in Seattle, but it would have been more of what they needed. So those are the two directions I could see it going.
Yeah, I like that.
And then, yeah, okay, there, Nick. I just saw Nick. So it was the Goyette pick,
the
one right before Hudson. I figured that might have been the direction Nick was going.
Me too.
And then this one, even bigger question from Rob here, Four Horsemen. What is the single worst decision in Kraken history? Now, I think I've covered this one already, and people generally know where I stand. Yeah. But it was the decision to hire Ron Francis.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not even close.
Right. Because any other decision that you could point to was a decision made by him. Right.
It stems from that. Yes.
Yes.
Well, there's one exception, actually. Well, and I think it would be the second worst decision the Kraken have ever made. And I think you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah, I do. But share it.
Okay. It's the decision to go with Root Sports.
Yes.
To televise the games. Yeah, bad decision. People knew it was a bad decision at the time. I didn't know it well enough, so but I heard from everybody once they made that decision because we were just starting off, but everyone was like, "Oh, this is really bad," and it was. It made it so people couldn't easily watch the games for their first couple seasons, and it really burned a lot of potential opportunity to grow the game, to build the fan base, all that sort of thing. But the reason it's not the worst is because you were able to fix that problem. Mm-hmm. And you were able to go and look, if the Kraken had chosen a GM that had actually built the team well and they were a winning team right now, the Root Sports thing could have been overcome because they could be in the playoffs right now and people could be watching those games. But Ron Francis has set the organization back at least 5 years, probably at least 6. We pretty much know, and maybe beyond that. And we just don't know how long that's going to be the case.
Exactly. No, I'm right there with you.
All right. Now this one from Chuck. Is there any site or analyst you found that provides a reasonable estimate for how many goals individual skaters, not goalies, save above or below average on defense over the course of a season, in the way that baseball stats people have attempted to do this with fielding runs saved above or below average? I'm not aware of any site that has anything like that. I know I talked to you, Dylan, beforehand. I'm like, do you have anything? I know there's defensive rating and there's like defensive wins above replacement. But I don't know about in terms of goals.
I don't either. You and I kind of, this is the one question we talked about before we started recording, and neither one of us could think of something.
Yeah. So I'm sorry, Chuck, I don't have anything for you there, but maybe someone, hey, if you know something, let us know in the comments. We can get that answer there and help us out. Next question here from Robert. Did you hear that the Golden Knights are blocking Bruce Cassidy from interviewing for the Edmonton coaching job? And the reason is they're still paying him. The Knights fired him, right? This is another reason why I don't like the Knights. So it is something important to go over just in terms of like how this works. So the Golden Knights didn't technically fire Bruce Cassidy. They relieved him of his duties, which basically means that he is still under contract, still employed by the team, and still receiving his money, which I believe is $4.5 million a year. So they are still paying him. And so as such, they do have the right to decide whether he can talk to other teams or not about jobs. That is, it's like a non-compete clause that you'll see in other industries. That said, it is the custom that in the NHL you do let those coaches talk to other teams, and it is unusual what Vegas is doing, and it is rubbing a lot of teams the wrong way, even though they do technically have the right to do it.
Yeah, exactly. It's within their right because of how the system is set up, but it's just so kind of unprofessional, right? It's like the word for it, right? And you know, again, as we talked about earlier, they're not afraid of that, right? Like they have no problems doing stuff like that if they feel like it helps them out, and not having to deal with Bruce Cassidy coaching in the division obviously helps them out. And so we'll see how that plays out, but yeah, it's a jerk move to do for sure.
Absolutely. And you know, you could argue maybe it would prevent them from getting good coaches in the future, but I think they're not worried about that because they're like, well, it's a desirable position. We have a good team, and you're going to have the pressure along with it. They do not care. So we'll see if that ever comes back to bite them. All of the things that they've done come back to bite them. And now this question from Terrible Lotus: how and why did the Colorado Eagles make the jump from the ECHL to the AHL? They were good, and another AHL team was wanted. I've been wondering about this because of how good the Kansas City Mavericks have been this season in the last few seasons. How has a team improved enough to jump up a league, or do they just say, we are up a league now, here are our NHL prospects? So do you want to handle this one first, or should I?
Okay, I don't know a ton of history around how this happened.
I read an article about it.
Okay, so then you know a lot more about the specifics on this. I will say that it is not, the way that these leagues are set up is not like, say, a European league would be set up with, you know, relegation and advancement and the ability to move between leagues. This generally has to do with certain like franchise charters being available and all sorts of things like that. But generally, there is not that kind of movement. That is why this is one of the few times that it has happened. It's just not, it's not how these leagues are structured.
Right. So it's not the case of, and I know that Colorado, the Eagles were very good, and I think it won like back-to-back Kelly Cups or something before going to the AHL, but it wasn't a result of that on-ice success directly. What happened in that case, and I think where you'll see it in the future, is that because of NHL expansion, you needed more AHL teams for teams to have AHL affiliates. And so that's what happened, where with Vegas being added to the league, well, they affiliated with the Chicago Wolves, but then you had other teams that then needed affiliations, and they do kind of move back and forth. I know the Kraken, it's been consistent with Coachella Valley, but other NHL teams sometimes will have different affiliates over the years. And so then you had it where the Avs were looking for an AHL affiliate. The Colorado Eagles made sense. One, because of their proximity, but also because of the success they had as a franchise. And that is the thing you do need, not necessarily the on-ice success, but the business success, where you can then support having a team in a bigger league. And so that's kind of what you'd be looking for, is the larger markets that tend to do well from a business perspective. And that would make sense. Plus, if you can have the geographic thing, that helps a lot too.
Right. And the business success leads to having facilities that are necessary, because there are different CBAs at play here. And there are different requirements for facilities, as far as practice facilities, training facilities, medical facilities, all of that kind of stuff. And so not all ECHL, in fact, most ECHL teams probably do not have the infrastructure to meet the CBA negotiated requirements of being an American Hockey League team. I think Colorado was unique in their ability to either have those already or be able to add them over the course of an off season and have that infrastructure in place. And what year was it? Was it part of the great realignment with the
Oh, it
AHL
might have
teams
been. It
and
was like
everything when they
2018,
when they
2019.
made the
Yeah.
big shift to have AHL teams be based closer to their NHL teams? Because before that, you had AHL teams in most of the cities that still have AHL teams, but the affiliations were all over the place, right? Like the Kings had their team in Manchester, right on the East Coast, Northeast, right? About as far away from LA as possible, right? Like there was tons of situations like that. And so in the mid to late 2010s, around that time, the NHL made it a big focus and teams shifted. They basically traded whole rosters so that teams could be played and these AHL franchises could be within easy call up range for NHL clubs. Because if you needed a player on a day's notice, it's a lot easier to do that if the team is a couple hours away, versus a day away, essentially, when you factor in everything going into that travel.
Right. And so I think the path for Kansas City, because I can't speak necessarily to the facilities or any of that stuff, but they are one of the better, it seems like, organizations
Definitely.
in the ECHL. The path would be more NHL expansion. And then that would facilitate. I mean, if there's teams, I still like Houston or Atlanta might be too far, but maybe not.
Yeah.
And so that would be kind of the path for them if it was going to happen.
Yep, definitely.
All right. Now we've got a couple very interesting questions talking about kind of the media landscape and our job within it. I again just was very interesting thinking about these two questions. The first one here from Joe. Preface: I used to be a newspaper reporter at a mid-sized daily. I know the difficulties of balancing competing news priorities. The question: what is your approach to balancing the task of cultivating sources within and around the Kraken organization while also reporting significant non-flattering insights and providing let the chips fall where they may analysis? Note, I believe ECH provides the most hard-hitting, honest assessments of the Kraken out of all the Kraken-centric media I can find. And then an example. The Kraken have struggled famously to develop a positive, lively, and buoyant locker room culture, yet there was little or no mention of the potential Brandon Tanev toxicity until long after he was traded. Does this silence help the organization, hinder the organization, keep media personnel from burning bridges, or help foster something negative that should have otherwise been made public? So how do we want to tackle this one first?
I mean, we'll go point by point. And I will say, I love this question. I love the next question. It's kind of a bummer that they have to come in, an hour and a half into this podcast. We probably should have made this a two-parter. But I do love this question. I will also start off by saying neither one of us really had any real media experience. And so much of what we do and still do, although we have a better idea of it now, is we were going off of what everybody around us was doing. Right? Like we weren't going to step out too far in any direction from where everybody else was. And then over time, we've been able to kind of feel out. We now know where certain lines are that you just kind of don't cross for professional reasons, whatever. But at the time, we just kind of were a little conservative at the start and figured that out. And then as far as like how we kind of came around to, in a lot of ways being the most critical, I guess, of anybody out there, it's not that we're trying to be critical. It's just that, we just call it as it is, right? That's all it is that we've followed hockey and we've talked about this with other teams for so long about what they need to do, what teams are successful. We've had so many conversations over the years at various points in league history about which GMs were doing a good job, why are they doing a good job, all of that. And so I think we just had a certain perspective that most fans just don't have amongst themselves. And we just had that. And so we just brought it and applied it to this organization. And unfortunately, that kind of knowledge base that we've had and that kind of, predilection for going for those kinds of questions has meant that we've ended up being more critical of this franchise and how things have gone down for them, just because of, frankly, how it has gone down for them.
Right. I just think you look at the team results on the ice season after season, and that's, I'm telling you, like, listen to us if the team is like a consistent playoff team. If they're making the playoffs every year, it's not going to be that we're all negative about everything. Like, it's just, I think it's in response to the results that the team has had. So we just haven't had the opportunity to, to cover positive results a ton. But I think also, as far as like cultivating sources and things like that, I think in our situation in Seattle, at least, I can only speak to our situation, but for us, I think critical coverage has never been a threat to sources or information or access for us. And we're very lucky about that, because that's not the case in every market.
Yep.
I know Vegas has gotten a lot of
Yep.
press around that, and that's certainly not the case in Vegas. But we personally have never been worried about that. And I received some really good advice on my first ever day covering the team. This was day 2 of training camp 2021. And I was talking to someone who's now a national writer, and he told me that it's okay to be critical and call things how you see them, as long as you put the time in. And I think if you're there every day, that's how you earn the respect, so that people with the team may not like that you're critical, but they respect that you put the work in to know what you're talking about, that you're there every day and you see the reality as you see it. And people are going to have different opinions on that, but they know that you're there every day and putting the time in. You're not just some guy, and I hate this term, but like just some guy in his basement just spouting off about everything that's wrong and being critical. That if you're there all the time, people are going to respect that. And so that's just something I've kind of tried to internalize as long as we've been doing this, that we do go, to practices, we do go to games, we put the time in. And so we've kind of, I don't want to phrase this, but like earned that right to kind of call it how we see it and at least be respected.
Right. There's a level of accountability where if somebody has an issue with us, or with us reporting on something or saying something a certain way, they can come and talk to us about it. Right.
Yeah.
In a professional way. Like, I'm not saying like it's a bad way, or in a way that's challenging the media or threatening our credentials or anything like that, but just in like a, hey, you guys said this, it rubbed me the wrong way, let's talk about it. And that's happened a very few times, but it has
not very
happened.
often, but it has.
Right. But us being around and being in that situation has meant that there is that accountability for us, and that is, I think, something that is greatly appreciated on that other side from the organization, is just that ability to do that if they felt that a line was crossed, or something. They are like, I get why you did this, it's fair, but maybe can you just show this side of it, or something like that kind of thing. Stuff like that. As for like, the Brandon Tanev situation and not reporting on everything, there's definitely things that we know and are very aware of, and that everybody in the media is very aware of, with the team. But it is difficult sometimes knowing where that line is, definitely not wanting to cross it, particularly when it comes to, calling out specific players for actions that occur in places like the locker room or things like that, because it's not public, right? It's one thing to call out players and be critical of them for on ice reasons or anything that happens in the public sphere, but then to use kind of the privileged position we're in of being in areas that the public aren't allowed, like, there is a different standard that has to then be met as far as like what you're reporting, and specifically around calling somebody out specifically, right? Like, you'd never be like, oh my gosh, so and so uses this product and it's awful, right? Or so and so never wears deodorant and it's unbearable having to talk to them, right? Like, it doesn't make sense to do something like that. There's no actual benefit to calling something like that out for anybody. And while there would be maybe some benefit to calling out guys that we feel like aren't good in the locker room, or that we've seen do things that are very questionable or would certainly impact how the public perceives them, it just, again, it feels weird, kind of, and exploitative of that privileged position we have of being able to go to those spaces if we were to be critical for guys doing things that don't directly relate to the job that where they're supposed to cover.
Right. And I think to explain a little bit more too about kind of how that works and where that line is. And this is something that Joe, I'm sure you'll understand as a former reporter, but maybe for people who don't have that experience, a lot of that information also that we can gain about something like locker room culture or a specific player, it comes from stuff that's either off the record or overheard conversations in that locker room. And that happens a lot. Like when we're in the locker room, there are a lot of conversations that you will kind of overhear just from player to player, but that is not ours to use specifically anyway. It's the kind of thing we can use to maybe inform our general opinions on things. but it's not things that we can use. That's not for us. And that's part of the privilege that we have in there, being able to hear it, but it's not something we can use. Now, I've never had a player like tell me or hint to me directly that like a teammate was a problem off the ice, like on or off the record. That has never happened to me. But I think you can just kind of get a general sense in any workplace, if you're allowed to just walk around and be there, the dynamics that are at play. But I think reporting from that directly, especially about a specific player, would jeopardize our ability to be there and gain that insight. And so, I mean, and with the Tanev thing, I think we did hint at it a little bit before he was moved. Like, we didn't. Yeah.
There was a point in time where, and it wasn't just us, like everybody was kind of like, okay, this is like, it's so prevalent that it can't be ignored anymore.
Right. And I think if you're, making the effort to really read between the lines and the way that everybody's talking, you can probably figure out who's being talked about. And also, I mean, with Mason Marchment, I think that was, we were pretty straightforward with that too. I think we even called for like, look, this isn't working. They need to get rid of him before they did.
It was obvious that he wasn't happy, that like the whole situation was just bad from the beginning there. And it was pretty easy to call that out there. But yeah, it like I said, when it gets to specifics, like we generally do a pretty good job, I feel like, of reporting on the overall mood in the locker room, kind of what the general issues are with the locker room and stuff. And again, the team's kind of gotten on board with that now too, as exit interviews and needing it to be more of a talkative space and stuff. But yeah, you can't certainly use stuff that's told to you off the record or that you just overhear. Like, it's not good practice.
Yeah.
It's again, that getting that one little bit out there is not, it's not worth your access and thus your career, but it also, generally those things are, again, nothing that is going to fundamentally help the franchise. Just to kind of bring it back around to your question, as far as like, would being more public about Brandon Tanev in the locker room have helped the team? No. How would it have helped the team, right? Like, maybe some fans then all of a sudden aren't fans of his, but that doesn't benefit the team at all, right? Like, it doesn't change things. Trust me, when there's a player that's an issue in the locker room, or there is like some sort of behind the scenes problem that we in the media may be aware of, the team 1,000% is aware of it. They're aware of it long before we're aware of it, even, right? Like, they understand that, and it's up to them to make the decision, as the people who actually have the power to make that decision, of when the benefits outweigh the dealing of that, and when they don't anymore, right? So it's just one of those things where there's lots of things like that we're going to know about, and that we have to deal with keeping that secret. And it's not something that I enjoy about this job, is kind of all of the secrets that have to be kept. I really don't enjoy it, but it's just kind of the way it is, because they would not benefit the public if they were out there. They certainly wouldn't benefit the team, and all it would do is lead to a lot of complications all over the place.
Right. And the only way it would make sense is if there's some issue of real abuse or harm or something like what bad is going. And at that point, then we wouldn't stay silent. And that's, the kind of thing where it's our responsibility not to, but we haven't seen anything like that.
Yeah, exactly.
In Seattle. So next question, and I'm sorry I don't have a name for it here, because it looks like it was posted and I couldn't find it. I don't know whether it was deleted or whatever. So I'm sorry, I don't know who asked this, but it's a great question. So credit to whoever you are there. How does the current landscape of Seattle media impact or fail to impact the Kraken organization and players? It feels that most coverage of the team is provided by local independent media. From an outside perspective, while it appears that the Kraken have embraced independent media, they still have incredible influence on which outlets have access to players, coaches, or team broadcasters. Specifically, why does it appear that your frenemies at Sound of Hockey get preferential treatment when it comes to access and interviews that seems to be missing from ECH? From ECH, CSS, Davy Jones' locker room, despite the consistency and quality of coverage these latter outlets provide. While you and Pierre's coverage is fantastic, does having coverage fragmented in smaller channels help or hurt getting the coverage and stories these outlets are attempting to convey to us, the audience? And then would having the hockey equivalent of Sounder at Heart, where there is one larger platform with several different channels, ECH, Sound of Hockey, CSS, Davy Jones' locker room, etc., within amplify the independent hockey media's presence and reach? Though a different sport, the popularity, audience size, and media presence of soccer in Seattle seems the closest comparison. Additionally, the unique nature of having both men's and women's teams in the same sport overlaps. Cannot thank you both enough for all the hard work and incredible coverage of the Kraken these past 5 seasons. Your shows, specifically the post-game live therapy sessions, are highlights of the seasons. Keep up all the great work and enjoy the off season. So thank you for this question.
Yeah.
Kind of a 3-parter here.
Yeah.
Shall we start like with the first part, I guess, with the,
yes.
the access and things like that?
Yeah, and I do want to preface this by saying they are definitely friends at Sound of Hockey, even though we're technically in competition with them. And I will say the idea that they get preferential treatment in terms of access or anything, that doesn't happen. They have just as much access as we do. They choose to use it differently than we do. So like, yes, they do far more interviews with players than we do, but that's a choice that we've made. We have the ability to do the same amount of interviews as they do. It's just, quite frankly, when we've done interviews in the past and then worked them into the podcast and stuff, they are our lowest performing podcast episodes. So we kind of stopped doing them because our audience told us, basically through the free market of listening and choosing what you want to listen to, that it's just not something you're actually that interested in, is hearing from those players directly. There's certainly plenty of other opportunities for you to hear from players. I mean, the team obviously puts out a lot of the media content after the fact or on social media. There are other great outlets such as Sound of Hockey, the work that Seattle Times does, all of that stuff. The players' voices are heard through many different avenues, and so we just didn't feel like we had to be one, and it felt like our audience, like I said, just wasn't very receptive of it.
Yeah. And I think this is going to echo a lot of what you said, but yeah, on the Sound of Hockey thing, like, I just want to say it in my own, my voice too. Like, we are friends, we get along really well. And I know, like, we sometimes joke that like we're technically competitors, so like we should have some animosity there, but we just have none whatsoever. And it's kind of funny. And also they were a big inspiration for us when we started doing this in the first place. Like, they're doing this before anybody. And so, yeah, tons of respect for them. And then, yeah, as for access, we've never been denied request for an interview. Some are tougher to put together. I think that's the only thing, is like, depending on who you want. I can't just call PR and be like, hey, can we get an interview with Bottrell tomorrow, to talk to him for an hour about stuff. It doesn't work like that. But it does come down to just a choice in content. And for the reasons you said, we've kind of leaned away from that. I guess one thing with Sound of Hockey is they do have John Barr, who is an incredible asset. Like, he knows everybody, and probably it helps grease the wheels a little bit, but like, come on, like he was a huge part of bringing the NHL here. So that Rolodex is an asset to them, but they have earned it fairly. And like, that's, just the case. And I'm glad they have it, because then people get to see these interviews. But I think, just each outlet tends to lean on its strengths. Like, for us, I think it's kind of in-depth analysis and like a willingness to be critical at times when it calls for it. Sound of Hockey is fantastic with those interviews. I think they do them as well as anybody. They've got good personalities, an upbeat vibe. They're funny. Charles at Circling Seattle Sports does a great job interviewing players. You want
talk about networking. Jeez.
Yeah, you go to him. I mean, nobody networks like him. Nobody works harder than him. Just boots on the ground to build that rapport with the players and everything. And not just for the Kraken, but for every Seattle sport. It is nuts what he does. And then, for Davy Jones' locker room, like their website is optimized in a way I could not dream of for us on the written side. Zame brings a knowledge of analytics and like deep analysis to these things, that it's always a pleasure to talk to him about that kind of stuff. So I think every outlet just kind of leans into their strengths, and that's why you see the difference in those sorts of things.
For sure. And then does having the coverage fragmented across all of these different things help or hurt getting out there to everybody? I don't think it hurts too much. Just because
you should be able to access all of that or whatever of it you want.
Right. And because there are, every one of us has different followings. Obviously, there's a ton of overlap because of just Kraken hockey fans. You're probably not just going to zero in on one outlet. But whenever there's new fans that come in, I see the question asked on social media, certainly on Reddit a lot, lots of stuff of like, okay, who should I listen to? And everybody does such a good job of kind of being like, okay, well, these are the different lanes that everybody has. So if you want kind of that positive, upbeat stuff, go with Sound of Hockey. If you like really good written content and want that analytics approach, go to Davy Jones' locker room. If you want the fun player interviews, go to Circling Seattle Sports. And if you want the kind of, the X's and O's talk or the prospect talk or whatever, come to us. And so I feel like if you're a new fan entering the space and you're willing to put in the small amount of effort of just kind of asking and engaging, you're going to be able to find your place and who you're going to want to listen to. I think the biggest issue, in my opinion, is not enough people are willing to just ask that question, right? Whether it's at a game, asking the people around you in the stands, going ahead and asking on Reddit or asking on social media, engaging with those communities to try to find the one that then fits for you. In my experience, there is a lot of people out there that want to be interested. They would love to hear this stuff, but they're just maybe too afraid to engage, or they just, for whatever reason, don't take that step of trying to do that research, or like I said, engaging with the like kind of larger community. Because once you engage with the larger Kraken fan community, so much opens up to you, including all of us on the independent media side, all of the team media stuff. Like there's just so many things that are there, and everybody involved in it does such a good job, whether it's the team representatives, us on the media side of things, the fans obviously being the biggest and most important piece. I think what needs to happen is it somehow there needs to be more of an ability for people to feel, I guess, comfortable taking that first step. And I think that that's just something that's all industries are kind of struggling with these days.
Yeah, and I think that's an issue that, I mean, we've tried thinking about that sort of thing, at least for us, because, and I think it's one where, yeah, a rising tide would lift all ships here. And I know there was the question too about having something where we all combine for something like Sounder at Heart. I think it would introduce a lot of logistical challenges as far as how it's all distributed and all of that, and also just I think we like each outlet likes the ability to kind of do our own thing, but also just, operate even from a business perspective as we each want. It's really just a matter of getting the word out there and kind of on the marketing side, where I still don't know that it would really increase our like marketing budget or abilities or anything combining. But it is the kind of thing, yeah, where there are so many Kraken fans or people that, follow the Kraken at some level. If I'll like run into someone just in person that I don't know, a stranger, but they're wearing a Kraken shirt or whatever, and I'll drum up a conversation that haven't heard of ECH or Sound of Hockey or CSS or Davy Jones Locker Room, but they know the Kraken and they watch the Kraken, see how the Kraken are doing. There's so many of those people, too many of those people, and so that's a problem. We gotta figure out. Like all of us, I think individually ought to, kind of in our own ways figure out how to what we can do about that.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those things where, anybody who's going to follow something like this, certainly that's going to listen to a 2-hour mailbag episode of one of these podcasts, right? You're very heavily engaged with the Kraken to a level that most fans aren't, right? And this is not a bad thing, obviously, because without you guys, we couldn't do any of this. So we very much appreciate the level of engagement you have. But that's really it, right? There's so many people that I see that wear Kraken merch and stuff because the logo is fantastic, the branding is fantastic, right? Like it's good stuff. It's another reason to still be a fan through the lean years, is just got dope logo you can represent. But there's a lot of people that are just not going to be that engaged, where they're like, hey, I have a limited amount of free time in my day to day. Right? Everybody does. I work long hours. I have to do all of this stuff. I've got family commitments, all of that. I can carve out time to watch a game every other night and engage with the team on that level. But do I want the hour day to day that I have commuting there and back to work to also be hockey coverage? Or do I have another interest or like that is my hobby, is my passion, whatever, and I'm going to listen and want to engage with that too? Right? In order to be a fan of us, particularly on the independent side, where it's not as easy as just flipping through the Seattle Times in the morning or getting the update in the Seattle Kraken app from one of the team reporters, you have to have the Kraken be a priority in your life. And I know everybody listening to this, that is the case with all of you, right? The Kraken are a very large priority. They're not maybe the number one priority. Obviously, you have family and work and all of those things, but they're high on your list of the, the entertainment circle that you decide to kind of structure your free time around, right? The disposable time that you have, so to speak. Right? It's not income, but it's time. And that's something that a lot of you choose to do with the Kraken, but not everybody who watches the Kraken or is quote unquote a fan of the Kraken is going to. And I think that that's the big thing, is just that generally I find when I engage with people who have never heard of any of us, on the media side of things. It's because they're just not going to be that level of Kraken fan where they want to then listen to an hour podcast or multiple hour-long podcasts from different outlets on the Seattle Kraken. They're going to watch 25, maybe 30 games a year. They're going to generally track the standings, and then that's kind of it. That's where their engagement dies or ends, I should say. And that's totally fine. They're still supportive of the team. They're going to go to a game or two a year. They're going to watch a handful on TV. They're going to know enough to talk a little bit at the water cooler at work, right? That's fine. But that is also the reality is that's the majority of sports fans in general. And so the issue for us is just that hockey is not super popular. The Kraken have, because of things like the root sports, because of the fact that they've struggled in the standings, they haven't been able to build that large of a fan base. And therefore, the amount of people that are going to be so committed as to reach out and try to find independent media outlets that are going to give them insights into that team, it's just not a huge pool of people to pull from. And that, I think, is the biggest struggle for us, for everybody else in this space. And I don't think that us all being under one roof fixes that problem. Sorry,
Yeah,
that's a very long-winded way of getting there, but I had to kind of build that out.
No, it's good. And I think you touched on it a little bit there, but the one thing I was going to add too was just that level of engagement from, say, the median fan that you were just describing. That is variable, and it can change, and it goes up when the team is winning and it goes down when the team is not winning. And we've seen that in our numbers, and all the outlets we were just talking about have seen that in their numbers as well. And so that's the biggest thing. The number one thing that could help us all grow is just the team winning and having success on the ice.
For sure.
All right. So we've got 4 questions left. Let's get through them. We're probably not going to be under 2 hours, but let's get there. From Sarah, first, congrats again on making Red Glare public. Thank you, Sarah, for that. Have you ever considered something similar focused on the PWHL, or would that be too many podcasts to juggle at once? So Dylan, I mean, you are definitely the more prominent of the two of us on the PWHL side. I've been more focused on the Red Glare side. So I'll let you kind of handle this answer. But we do have, and I know, Sarah, you know this, but we do have our torrent-focused podcast, The Downpour. But as far as doing a league-wide one for the entire PWHL, is that too many podcasts to juggle at once, Dylan?
I think so.
Yeah.
Already adding in the Red Glare and making it public and trying to make it more of a focus this year has presented a lot of challenges for us. In addition to the PWHL coverage focused just on the torrent, right? Not even the whole league, to the point where, I'm doing the Downpour with Charles, and that's kind of we're partnering and reaching across the aisle there to kind of make it happen. So yeah, it is unfortunately one too many podcasts. That's where the stretch and the reach of kind of, to go to the last question, how viable all of these markets are and how much time we can spend on this kind of becomes an issue when we have to focus on other things in our lives or other work opportunities, things like that. And it limits how much time we can spend just covering hockey and consuming things and thinking about things and prepping and all of that stuff, because it's not as easy as just recording for an hour a week, right? Like that would be easy. It's no, you have to be following all of those, you have to be watching games all night, you have to be doing all of that, and it becomes there has to be a endpoint for us, unfortunately. And I think that's one that just isn't feasible right now.
Yeah, and that's a good segue into the question we have, but I want to just get to the second part here from Sarah. Much more reasonable ask. Come up to Vancouver for a Golden Eyes versus Torrent game? I would love to. I actually had a trip planned for toward the end of the season that didn't come together because my wife and I got sick, but would love to do that next season. I'm definitely going to take at least one Vancouver trip this summer. So I'll be up there, not for a Golden Eyes Torrent game, but I would love to do that next year.
Yeah, I've still never been to Vancouver, period. I would love to go up there.
Need to take you to Vancouver.
I'd love to find a time if the Kraken and Torrent were both up there, kind of do like a 1-2 punch with both of them, because I'd love to also, go check out Rogers and see a Canucks game at some point as well. So, but yeah, definitely that's something that I'm interested in doing and would definitely be down to doing, as well as just checking out the city in general, because I know you've spoken very highly of it.
I love Vancouver. Wonderful city. Love it. Love to visit. I don't visit enough. I need to visit more. But anyway, segue from the last one into this one from Sean. Will you guys please consider going back to post game every game, or at least multiple times a week? We need it. And I, for one, really missed it. No way am I alone. Frankly, it has been one of the best things about supporting this team thus far. And I know you're not alone, Sean. It is it is a request we've gotten a lot this season since going back to once a week. And like, that's why it like pains me to kind of give the answer and just kind of square it with the demands on our time for various other things.
Yeah, we still have to have our end of year meeting and discussion and figure out what next year is going to look like for us. But again, it goes back to a lot of what we just talked about, where there is only so much time that we can put into this. And there's also, specifically with the post game lives, there's a mental health like component to it. And like it is so unbelievably grueling on us, particularly when the team is not performing well, particularly when it's lots of issues. Like I was really starting to miss the post game lives every game through sections of this year. But down the stretch when they were losing every night and falling out of a playoff spot, boy, I wasn't missing it. And I know it's a really good cathartic thing for everybody out there, the post-game therapy sessions. And I know the good that it does for everybody out there in the community. And so, I do want to acknowledge that. And I do feel bad that we're not there for you guys after every single game. But it is so unbelievably taxing. Even when times are good, it's very taxing emotionally and mentally and time wise. And when things are not going well, it's just that, but it's so compounded by the kind of the lack of on ice success. And I was not missing it in the slightest down the stretch there. It was so tough. And I know it would have been tough because it's similar to some of the questions we get in like the mailbag here, where we struggle to answer them when it's like, well, what can they do this offseason? It's like, well, I don't really know. And that becomes the number one thing when the team is struggling that we get asked on post games is like, well, why is this happening? Why can't they just be better? Why isn't X, Y, or Z? And we just can't give an answer. And then when you have to answer that question, sometimes multiple times a night, every game, it just becomes too much.
Yeah, and when the problems are largely the same for years on it, literal years on end, and so I mean with the post games again, it's part of it is just the format and what and when it demands of us basically, but it is the most taxing thing of all that we do, and for this coverage and everything, both time wise and then also again just mental health wise, it is the most taxing for sure. And I think the decision for it for this season was that also we kind of had to make a choice just based on how much time we had between continuing to do post game all the time and red glare and the downpour. We did not have time for all of that. And as far as choosing the other podcasts, I mean, on the red glare side, we kind of felt and also the financial situation dictated that we kind of needed to expand a little bit, like just based on where we were at, we needed to at least try to kind of reach out to a broader audience, and that was just something that was essential for us to do. And then on the torrent side, we love women's hockey. We really wanted to cover this team. Like it's something that I think has been, I mean, I won't speak for you, but Dylan, but it seems to me that it's kind of helpful on the mental health side. It's a nice palate cleanser. It's a refresher, right? And it kind of, helps give us that energy. And so that's kind of the decision we made there. And so again, it's one where we haven't had our end of year meeting, and we hear the feedback. We really do. We know that people miss it. And there's certainly parts of it that we miss
for
quite
sure
a bit about having that routine. It's the community. It's all of you guys. You are why we miss it. But it is something that is just really, really taxing for us, and we have to weigh it against other things that we do.
Yeah. There's the mental, emotional side. There's the financial component, and it just becomes we can only do so much in this space, and you unfortunately can't please everybody, right? Like if we were to go back to post game lives every game, it would mean little to probably no PWHL coverage, just because it's really hard, because then you're talking about potentially watching games every single night of the week, and that becomes tough. You need some days off to spend time with family and run errands and do basic things. And then you also like being able to, when the torrent were playing the same night as the Kraken, be able to jump back and forth between games, right? Because I didn't have to be glued to every single second of the Kraken game. I could watch the torrent game, wait for, kind of a break in action, jump back over to the other one, or I didn't have to make sure once intermission ends for one, I'm definitely back on the Kraken game, right? I could finish the period with the torrent and then jump over and have missed a minute or two, right? Like things like that just logistically becomes so challenging when you have to pay that close attention to every single game. It's just so much.
Yeah. So hopefully that kind of helps answer the question there. Again, I'm not like happy
Yeah.
with the answer, but that's just the reality. All we can do is be honest with you guys.
Yeah.
And then we'll close it out with this question from Chuck. Something a little lighter here on the topic of fighting. Have either of you two been in fights on the ice in your young hockey playing days, or RJ, anytime in your adult league? And if so, what led up to them and how did they come out for you? Do fights happen in your adult league, RJ? So Dylan, I'll let you start with this because I'm not as familiar with your hockey playing career because that was all before I met you.
Yeah.
But you ever getting any fights?
No, it's certainly when you're not an adult, it is completely not allowed within the rules. And I think in most adult rec leagues, it's also not allowed in the rules. Like you fight, you're suspended for the rest of the year in most of them. So it's just not something that happens. So no, I've never been in a fight on the ice. Certainly I wasn't when I was playing at elementary school age. That wasn't really something we were doing. We were still just trying to figure out how to do basic skating and the overall rules and playing swarm puck where everybody just collapses around it.
Did you even have the ability to stand up and throw punches if you wanted to?
I mean,
like at that
we
level?
did, yeah.
That
At
age?
that point,
Okay.
we did, but there's 6 or 7. You're skating well enough to do that, but like it's just not even something that enters your mind at that
No.
age.
Yeah, no, agreed. And so like for youth hockey, so I mean, also I'll speak to the adult league. Like fights generally don't happen. Like a proper fight doesn't happen. Little scrums happen, of course, as happens in all levels of hockey. But like, no, fights just generally don't happen, and there are stiff punishments for it. I've never gotten into a fight in my adult league. I also just generally don't take penalties. That's one of the things about me. You look up my stats, and there are very. I'll go a year or two between penalties. So I'm just generally not that kind of player. I have received a fighting major once though.
Yeah. Oh yeah, you're right. Yeah.
Back at the Roller Dome days.
Yeah.
Back in the Roller Dome days when I was roller hockey as a kid. I must have been like 9 years old. I was young. And what happened? I did not deserve the fighting major. The gloves never came off. But the story is it was after the play. The puck went up into the netting, whistle goes, and somebody on the other team just like full speed ran my goalie, just like charged him right into the net. Don't know why he did it. But then I saw that I was the closest one to it, and I just skated at him full speed, slammed him against the boards, both standing up, and was just kind of trying to push him or kind of punch him a little bit with my gloves, and he was doing the same to me. And then the ref comes over, separates the two, and gives us both fighting majors, which I guess at that age you just want to make sure to end it. But the gloves never dropped. You could like I would think how you'd want to do it if you're thinking like from NHL penalty standpoints is like roughing on both sides and like a 10-minute misconduct if you want to.
Yeah.
But anyway, that's the closest I've been to being in a fight. I've also been ejected from a game, as you know, because our old roller hockey league had a rule where if you take 3 minor penalties of any kind, you are kicked out of the game. And it was tripping, hooking, tripping. And and I just looked at the ref and he's like, yeah, I'm like, oh wait, am I kicked out of the
You're
game?
done.
He didn't even realize.
Yeah.
He's like, oh, I guess you are. I went in my 3 years in that league at that point. Those are my only 3 penalties, and they came in the same game.
Yeah.
So,
it was the one game RJ decided to defend. And
it's
you
true,
have an active stick. And then after that,
one of the hooks and one of the trips, like the hook was on a guy who had a tap in into a wide open net. So I'm like, all right, I'm going to do this.
Good penalty. Yeah.
Yeah. And the trip was the same thing.
Yeah. It's fun stuff. But yeah, and keep in mind also youth hockey players, you're playing with full cages, like mandated. Like it just isn't.
Yeah, there's no point
to fight.
Yeah,
nobody wants to sit there and punch a cage.
Yeah, you're not going to get very far if you try to fight there. But good question, Chuck. Good lighter note for us to end on here.
Yep, definitely.
As we're over 2 hours and 10 minutes on this mailbag. Thank you everyone for the questions. I think we should learn the lesson next time and just make it 2 episodes.
It has to be
default
2.
to that.
It has to be 2. And you know what? Take your time getting through this. I don't know what next week is going to bring. It probably wasn't going to bring a ton. So feel free
to listen to this all in one sitting.
Carry over and save some for next week as well. I want to thank everybody for listening. I want to thank Loftus of Rico Tessendorf. We probably should have done a mid-roll for him with how long this one is. He deserves it. While we hope none of you ever need his services, the odds say that at some point someone out there will be involved in an accident, whether on the road, at work, or anywhere in between. And when you are, we hope you call Rico at 425-778-9800 or visit his website, ricotessendor.com, to schedule a free consultation. He's won millions of dollars for his clients and helps thousands of people in the greater Seattle area. And as a fellow member of the ECH community, we know he'll help you too. I can also guarantee that he is somebody who will have made it through this 2-hour, 10-minute monster of a podcast because he does care that much. And it's another reason for any of you, if you ever have any questions, to reach out with the mailbag of your own to good old Rico. That's going to do it, though. Thanks so much for all the questions, everybody. Thanks so much for all of your continued support, and we will see you all next time.
Hey everyone, before we go, we just wanted to give a quick shout out to all of our awesome patrons over at patreon.com/Emerald City Hockey, especially our Terror of the Deep patrons.
Thank you so much for making all this possible. We really appreciate your support.